allow them for everybody, that's okay. But you can't allow one commercial space. So there's no vacancy.
I was on this committee. The city.
Yeah, but there's no like different. Like, oh, there's yeah, and as Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara, so okay, if we've got to, then morally construed to say nobody can be on. Because I can bring up, why do you think that commercial, but not my commercial? What is that? Walk up and say, oh, I'll give it he's walking away, we're gonna get arrested. So. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Come on, big guy, how you doing? Yeah, good to see you. Been a while. Yeah, we gotta get this another meeting.
Oh, God. You know, people think we don't have a sense of humor. Why is that?
Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Committee on Thursday, April 18th, 2024. I now call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Lisa, will you start us out with the roll call, please?
Member Lapp?
Here.
Member Kavanaugh?
Here.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden Hess?
Here.
Chair Jacobson Bates?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I have a move to approve the order of the agenda, or is there an item that anyone would like to have pulled?
Move approved as presented.
Actually, I would like to, I would like to pull item, get the right number here. It is item 2D, the Glassdoor Boutique.
I move to second that removal.
Lisa, roll call, please.
Member Lapp?
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden Hess?
Yes.
Chair Jacobson Bates?
Yes.
Just make sure your mics are on there, please.
Yes. Okay. I'm good? Okay. Please remind me, do we address this item now? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump to item 2D. Staff report, please.
So this is to approve a land use permit for 1689 Copenhagen Drive for proposed signage, one wall sign 6 square feet in size, one hanging sign 6.32 square feet in size, and the proposed project is category categorically exempt from CEQA. They are going to be placing a wall sign on the building frontage facing Copenhagen Drive. And then the hanging sign is going to be above the entrance in that alleyway there, where there are additional hanging signs with the other businesses. And the applicant is here if you have questions.
Does anybody up here have questions of staff to start with? Do we have any comments in the room? Would the applicant like to come forward? Any comments that you would like to share with us?
I have no comments, other than we really would love to hang our signs up. We've been in business for a couple of months now. We moved here to the city of Solvang. And, we want to abide by the rules, of course, of the committee and the city. And we think we have. And we like to hang our signs. That's why we're here. We want to do business.
I'd hate to have you come all the way down here with a piece of evidence and not have an opportunity to show it. Do you want to do that?
So Exhibit A. So this is the sign that we propose to hang underneath the eaveway, underneath the walkway of the businesses. It's a two-sided sign. It's been our brand for 5 years. And we had a sign similar to this hanging in another location, another business that we had. And same business, but boutique. The other sign we want to hang facing Copenhagen out in the front of the business. And here is that sign with the black trim. So pretty much the same sign, one-sided sign.
Okay, so the reason I asked that this be pulled from the agenda for discussion is a couple of items. We are tasked with finding or approving signs that are designed to enhance the character of the village and the kind of old world. And the aluminum with the vinyl lettering is kind of outside of that kind of customary realm. We usually are looking at materials that simulate the look of wood, realizing that that's usually not wood that's used anymore, and has dimensional aspects to it, give it a kind of hand-carved look. So that is why my concern in pulling that. Anybody else have any comments here?
Right, so I think the hanging sign is conforming to the standard as written, which it simulates wood and it has some dimensionality, even though the lettering is not raised. It at least has some look of wood consistent with others. The flat metal panel sign, we would like to see it also be conforming with some dimensionality, and some look like it is made to look.
So now you're talking about changing brand?
No, not
no.
the brand at all, not what it says, just the material.
So if this was on a wood sign, this would be okay?
Yes, and if it had some dimensionality to it.
So our reasoning for this was inclement weather, rain on wood?
Right, so it doesn't have to be wood. It can be faux, uniform, what's it called, urethane pressed, whatever, I forget the term. But it can be simulated. It just needs to have some dimensionality. The approach to signage in town continues to be more and more consistent, where it has varied, and we have allowed a non-dimensional sign. It really does dilute that
Right.
work that we're doing to try to make the town look more cohesive.
I understand that, but do you also understand that there's also other signs in the city that
yeah.
are made of this very
Yes,
same?
we do, and what we're trying to do going forward is be very specific about what we're requiring in terms of the materials, the dimensionality, and the look. So we're not going to be very broad anymore. We're gonna be very specific about what the issue is.
So that would be in a policy that you have?
We're going forward, we're gonna be
No,
specific.
a current policy that you have
Right
now?
as of this moment, I'm telling you that what we would like to see is the
Right,
sign affixed to the building have some dimensionality to it and look like wood.
and I understand that, but I'm just asking that there are other signs in the city that
Yeah.
are made of this same
That
exact
is
material.
correct,
Number
but-
one, and I asked you for a policy, and I'd like to have that policy, to
Okay,
be able to see that policy.
Can you
that-
refer to the design guidelines?
Well, I am looking right now, and it says signs shall be designed to enhance the special character of the village and the buildings on which they are placed. In general, overlay large lettering on any signage which competes with the architecture or the character is not allowed. It needs to fit within the old world style.
Which
And
is?
the,
What is old
shiny-
world to you?
Just a moment. The shiny kind of aluminum finish does not conform with that. Perhaps our staff can give some input on this. Staff, do you have any input that you can assist me with?
No, I'm not, I want you to know this. I'm not trying to be problematic, and I do want to follow the rules. Because we follow rules, you know, where we come from. As a prosecutor and as a, you know, we follow rules. I work for the district attorney's office, right? Anyway, I read through all of your materials and your policies and all. And I think they need to be updated. But you already have practice, or you have people who have these sort of signs in your city, and they are up now. And I believe that, I'm not saying you're singling my store out or us out, but you already have past practice of allowing this on other buildings. And your policy is very vague. Old world, what does old world mean? It all depends. For me, you know, at my age, old world might be different than what it means for this gentleman or anybody else up here. So I think it needs to be just a little bit more clear what you mean. But I'm going by your past practice, and I looked at signs around the area because I wanted to be compliant and I wanted to have my signs up. You know, this is business. I know that some of you are business people, and we want to attract business to our business, right? So all I'm saying is, why are you singling my sign out when it's your past practice to have other signs that are the same hanging in your city?
It's not the past practice of our committee to do that.
Well, it would have to be if there's signs already up.
But remember, these 5 people here didn't necessarily approve all those signs. The old world description, I think aluminum, it's kind of, I would think there would be a consensus that aluminum doesn't, with vinyl lettering, doesn't fit within that description. You're right, there are variances in the interpretation of what that would mean. In fact, some of the old rules call for wood to be used
Right.
and carved.
Right.
And clearly, we know that people aren't going to be using carved wood. By the same token, the reason I believe that you're making your business choice to be here in Solvang is that you want to build upon the brand which brings people to our community.
Correct.
And to that end, we are asking you to make sure that your signage complements and enhances that character that you have chosen to build your business on.
And I would say it does if you have other signs in your city that are exactly the same way. Now, I can tell you this, you can't go back and say, well, this board wasn't the other board that allowed this. It's your history. So we have to stay with your history. So I'm not going to argue.
No, but the reality is that past practice doesn't dictate future decisions, that not in any case under any kind of, like, you know, if you agree to something.
Law and policy, it does, ma'am.
Right, but I mean, things do change, things do evolve, things do progress.
But I don't see that in your policy.
We recognize that.
Right.
But what we are trying to do, to the best of our ability, is to make something better. And if we were to just go ahead and approve everything based on whatever everyone wanted, we wouldn't have a character
Right. But-
retained,
But I don't think
frankly.
I don't think we're doing that because we already have signs like this up in our community.
But what we're saying is, what we're saying is the fact that some of those signs have been allowed in the past have diminished the overall character of what we are trying to accomplish in Solvang. And we are actually trying to now be very clear about why we don't want those going forward.
Excuse me, can you just turn your mic on? Your microphone?
Ah, sorry. I understand your point of view because you feel it's unfair to you compared to what, so we have to make a decision about that too. Because sinon we would have someone else and someone else, so you have to decide. But I understand how you feel.
I do too. It's
Absolutely.
Not, feeling is completely there. It's just that at what point do we start to actually get serious about making things more consistent? And that is
You get serious when you have a good policy, and your policy is updated, and it dictates it, because this wasn't free. This cost us
I
money.
completely acknowledge that. I understand that.
Yeah, and we very much try to be sympathetic to the business owners and therefore, understanding that there is a significant cost to opening a new business. Would have encouraged you to wait for approval before production, however, given that there might have been a concern present. So I'm going to turn it back and ask staff and our attorney that's present here if you can assist this committee in informing our applicant in any fashion here.
Your design guidelines simply state old world style, but provides no definition. That's just, again, the honest truth, not
Yes.
sugarcoating it. It is up to the committee to determine at this point what is old world and what is not. It sounds like you are directing the applicant to, and I would suggest that we would allow for the hanging sign to be placed to at
Yes.
least provide the applicant the ability to advertise their business within the community as they are already open. And that as we are quickly going to the summer months, I would hate for this business to lose on that foot traffic due to lack of signage. And I believe you are directing the applicant to return back with additional signage with the three-dimensionality.
Actually, if the applicant, I believe that there could be a motion to approve it if the applicant would utilize materials that are more similar to his other sign that have that look of wood and dimensionality that are present in that sign.
So would a UHD or other similar material be
Yes.
acceptable? Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, that the applicant can fabricate a new sign and this would be left up to city staff to approve?
Correct, to expedite the process and allow for the one sign to be hung now and the other one to be produced without having to return next month.
There is also the factor of the business. It's glass, so it's kind of modern. I know in Solvang, but I think that would go with.
Then you can vote that way.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
Because it's
I would make a motion to support, as said, we would approve the hanging sign as presented and the applicant to return a revision to the wall sign with dimensionality built in either a UHD or composite wood-like material and can be approved by city staff if it's compliant.
Second the motion.
So we have a first and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Member Lapp?
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh?
No.
Member Martin?
not sure.
Vice Chair Drayden Hess?
Approved, yes.
Chair
Yep.
Jacobson Bates?
Yes.
Member Martin, you must either yes,
Yes
no,
or
or
no?
abstain, or abstain.
So, this one, but not this.
Yes, yes, no. or
Okay,
abstain.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh, my vote was yes. Yeah, sorry. I guess you didn't call my name. Maybe you did already.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
I wasn't trying to be a pest, I promise.
Yeah.
You know.
And nor were we.
Yeah.
We appreciate your consideration, and we wish you continued success with
Thank
your
you.
business. Okay. All right, so now we're going to move on to public communications for non-agenda items. Lisa?
Did we already approve the consent item? I know we.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
you did? I know we, so what, it was a motion on to approve all but 2D, was that right?
yes.
I thought it was a motion to exclude 2D, but I didn't know that the overall,
Do we
the
want
other
to
consent
clarify?
items had been approved.
Yes.
I interpreted the motion to approve the order of the agenda, but taking
Pull items.
out. There wasn't any public comment on the remainder of the consent agenda, so that's why I would interpret the prior motion to approve the agenda minus 2D. But the consent agenda with 2A, B, and C was, my understanding, had not been addressed.
Understand?
So we're going to go back to consent agenda. Did you, no. So do we need to have a vote now?
You need a vote for the consent agenda.
Okay.
In public.
So do we have any other items that need to be addressed pulled from the consent agenda? Minutes?
I have it's a nit in a way, but it's in the minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it's
So
on.
it sounds like we
Oh, yeah, I
should
guess
have
so.
a motion to pull.
Never mind, I'll withdraw it. It's a nit, and I'll
Sorry.
deal with it directly with staff.
I do have some revisions to the meeting minutes, and I just want to clarify the reason why I want to make this statement.
So then we need a motion to pull item, sorry.
I'm so moved. It's
Okay,
item A.
The minutes, item A.
2A.
2A.
And I'll
Gotta
move that.
Move, okay. I guess Lisa, another roll call vote.
What I was going to suggest for the board is you go ahead and approve items B and C after you
Okay.
have public comment on the consent agenda, then address 2A after that.
Yeah.
Okay,
But you should have public comment on everything on the consent agenda, so that if there's someone in the public who wants to comment on it, they'll have that opportunity.
okay, so we're going to start with public comment on the consent agenda. Is there anybody in the room that would like to comment? Anybody in Zoom? Okay, so now.
So then the board could make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus number A, or letter A, or you could just move to approve B and C specifically and then address A separately.
Okay, so why don't we have a motion to approve B and C?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, vote. Do we have to do a roll call again? Yes.
Member Lab,
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jordan Hess,
Yes?
Chair Jacobson Bates.
Yes. Okay, then we're going to circle back to item 2A, the minutes. And Jennifer, I believe that you had comments on that.
Yeah. So the only comments I wanted to make, because this is a written record relative to discussions regarding development plan and lot merger located at 1687 and 1693 Mission Drive, APN 139-143-025 and 026, I want to make sure that my statements were clear and correct, because as written, they can be misunderstood. In the first paragraph, starting with Vice Chair Dryden Hess, moving down in that line, it says, peak of the roof line in the back building and suggested increasing the scale. I didn't say that. I actually said suggested increasing the number of half timbers. Okay, so that was the first revision. The second is later in that paragraph. It says, she commented on keeping the patina of the natural patina on the grain silo or installing horizontal or vertical siding in the original wood. That's very confusing. What that should say is grain silo and installing horizontal or vertical siding in the original wood in lieu of the board and bat siding. That makes it much more understandable to me. Okay, the last one, and thank you for keeping with me. Two paragraphs next, starting with discussion followed regarding the silo. After the second line, at the entry, should be a period to end that statement. And we should insert discussion followed regarding the tower height. That's it, and that will eliminate the confusion. Thank you.
Okay, staff, did you get all that okay? And if not, Jennifer can assist you with that. So do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I have a question, I mean, I had a comment also
Oh, yeah,
in the
back
minutes.
to you.
I haven't got to it. As long as we're going to talk about it, it's again relates to comments on, I guess it's paragraph 5, committee member comments. It says, Member Kavanaugh wondered about parking in lieu fees, period. End of discussion. Now, there was a purpose in breezing up the issues around the parking in lieu fees because it was an important part of the proposals before us, and I was curious to know, not just, I wasn't wondering about them, I wanted to know what they were, I wanted to know how they are changed, I want to know the periodicity of it, and if possible, want to know what any strategies exist to make those adjustments in the future, because we have several important development projects where in lieu parking concessions are going to be part of the discussion. So it wasn't that I was just wondering about them. I kind of chafed when I saw that was what the minutes said about my comments, and the absence of any reply from staff to my wondering. So that's my comment about that. I mean, I think it was an important issue, and it will be an important issue, I promise. And just wanted a clarification of what they are now, where did they change, what is the plan for them, and so forth. But, it ends up in the minutes that I just wondered about.
I think this exemplifies some of our concerns about the minutes, and we understand that there's video recording that can be referenced. However, sometimes the minutes seem to omit the kind of context as a whole. And I appreciate the comments and the clarity. So at this point then, are we ready to move forward with the motion to approve the minutes with the amendments as stated? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, vote please.
Member Lapp?
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jordan Hess?
Yes.
Chair Jacobson Bates?
Yes. Okay. Well, now we're on to public communication non-agenda items. Lisa.
The committee welcomes your input. At this time, you can address the committee on items that are not on the agenda. The time limit is 3 minutes.
Is there anybody in the room that has an item they'd like to bring forward that is not on the agenda? Anybody in Zoom? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move forward. Okay. All right. So I think we're on to item 4. Staff report, please.
PowerPoint up. So discussion and possible action to recommend approval of a land use permit for 610 Alamo Pintado Road for 2 wall signs approximately 25.48 square feet in size, window lettering in 3 locations, and a modification to the maximum allowable size. For wall signs, the proposed project is categorically exempt from CEQA. So the applicant is moving into what is currently Pacific Western Bank, which will be changing ownership. The existing signage was previously approved by the Board of Architectural Review on December 30th, 2010. The applicant is requesting 2 wall signs. Each sign is approximately 25.48 square feet in size. This is slightly smaller than the existing signage. They will be placed in the same location as the existing signage and will be internally illuminated. The applicant is proposing window lettering. It will be placed on the double doors at the main entrance and on the door to the left of the main entrance. Although the wall signs do not meet the sign standards in place for outside of the village area, they are proportional to the existing building design. The proposed window lettering meets all standards. The proposed project is categorically exempt from CEQA because the proposed on-premise signage is considered a minor alteration of an existing structure that features no expansion of the existing or proposed use. And staff is recommending approval for the 2 wall signs and for the window lettering. Oh, sorry. I was going to mention that the applicant is on Zoom if you guys do have any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for staff up here? Okay, then we'll take public comments. Is there anybody in the room that would like to make any comments on this? Okay, I understand the applicant is on Zoom. Would you like to make any comments regarding this? If so, you need to, there you go, unmute yourself.
You can hear me. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yes, hi. My name is Chris Kelly, and I'm representing Bank of California. And thank you very much, staff, for the presentation. I really don't have anything else to add. Let me see if I can have my camera. Nope. Anyway, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Stand by if we have questions. Anybody up here like to make some comments regarding this proposed sign?
Yeah, sure. Yes, sure. I think that it being a modification to to be larger than an allowable sign is just because the sign existed before. To me, again, is sort of, I'm in this mode of just because two wrongs don't make a right. And so in this case as well, I think the sign is oversized for the scale of the building. And I think it's excessive in terms of 2 very large signs that are also over the required size limit. So to me, I think they both need to be reduced in size, in my mind.
The visibility of this building, has kind of a small area from which it is visible within the parking lot there. So it's not like you need to be able to see it from the highway because you can't. The exception to the rule where it is, the requirement is a maximum of 12 square feet, and this is 25.4, basically 25 and a half square feet for the one sign. The other sign is a max of 10, and it's 17 inches for the lettering size. Those are concerns and set precedents. Understanding that this was approved in 2010, I think since then there are, the visual corridor is less. There's more businesses, and the scale of the signage in proportion to the building doesn't need to be as large. It's not gonna look like a small sign on a big building, so it would be proportionate from the scale that I am looking at. Committee, any other comments here? Mike?
Well, oh, yeah, it's on.
Good.
The issue I have, I guess this is, the staff is recommending that it be approved as presented to us, though. Even though the one sign is basically twice as large as the maximum requirement under that category. I guess I'm interested in knowing, particularly when we're going to be talking about objective design standards later, why we would exempt a sign so much larger than the standard that exists now.
So you're asking why they did it back?
Well, your staff did it. I mean,
Yeah.
staff made the recommendation, didn't they?
Yeah, back in 2010?
We're talking about the current
Yeah.
Oh, the
recommendation.
current
Yeah, but this is a
recommendation.
new
The current-
application,
the current
isn't it?
recommendation.
For new signs?
The current, because based on the findings that were made, nothing has substantially changed from, it'd be different if the buildings became bigger, or if there was additional development, or something to the matter of the physical environment. Nothing has changed. So.
It's a new sign,
Other than it's a new sign.
yeah.
But,
Well, I mean,
looking at
That's a
it.
change.
Right, so looking at the exceptions to your sign standards, if the BAR and these sign standards were in place at that time, if they've made the findings and no changes to the physical environment has occurred outside of cars being more futuristic and, us becoming taller as human beings, if nothing has really changed, then I, from city staff, felt it was appropriate to just carry on that recommendation. Now, again, it's our recommendation. You don't have to follow the recommendation.
No, I just,
And-
we're going to have a conversation later on, though, about objective standards as opposed to, applying subjective kinds of criteria that, there's not a big change, so what the heck? This is a brand-new sign, so you have kind of a blank canvas, it seems to me, with the new sign. And
But again,
seems to me is, you had a choice to basically just say, well, there's not a big change, or you say, well, it's a new sign, and the standard, for whatever reason it was approved, but the standard is the new customer. I just want to make sure there's clarity, because otherwise, so we know what to expect going forward.
And to be frank, it's again, the exception was made from the BAR. The exceptions have pretty much stayed the same. From a physicality standpoint, nothing has changed. Additionally, these type of signs, specifically for banks and medical offices, there's always the argument that those folks who are actually looking for these businesses are not utilizing their GPS that are sitting in their car or their phones. And so they're looking to, particularly in a shopping center, they're looking to quickly identify the place to bank, and therefore they should be larger. So while that, again, the applicant on Zoom didn't make that argument, but that's typically the argument for having these larger signs. Again, it is the committee's discretion here. There are findings to the exceptions. If you do not wish to make those findings, you can kick this back to city staff, and we'll work with the applicant to reduce the size of the sign.
I'm just trying to figure out, the scale or scope of the conversation we're going to be having about, objective standards.
Right.
Literally, and it's pretty easy, it's an objective standard. But then I hear
it is, but
exceptions
it's
to the
an-
objective standards that are pretty clear, because, well, it's a big bank.
It is, and it's objective to a fault. And because the typical, and again, the TRC, this is outside the TRC, so let's throw all this, old world stuff out. Now we're talking outside the TRC. Typically, a wall sign is tied to a linear square footage. There's a rhyme and reason.
Yes.
None of that exists here. It's an arbitrary 12. So someone in some shape or form decided 12 is going to be the limit. There's no tie whatsoever, because if you want scale, tie it to the linear square foot. Now we're becoming completely objective, because that creates the scale of a wall sign. Which, if this is the case here, then yes, that would be the appropriate, that would almost be the appropriate direction to give to the applicant, tie it to the linear square footage, because then that shrinks ups and downs based on the actual building size, and therefore doesn't make the wall sign look so, because now a smaller business will have therefore a smaller sign.
So for today's purposes, and just in case there's somebody out there in the world looking at this later, there is a workshop that immediately follows this meeting where some of these items, and specifically items of this nature, will be discussed. So for today's purposes, we have a proposal here that is far outside of this current standards. Are there other comments that you would like to
I
make
don't have
here?
any more, no.
Do we have a motion for, taking this back to staff?
No, I'll move approval.
Do we have a second?
Just to clarify, move approval.
Of the recommendation of staff.
Second.
I guess it'll be a roll call vote. Lisa, please.
Member Lapp,
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden Hess,
No.
Chair Jacobson Bates.
No. Okay, so now we're almost to the end of our meeting. So are there any committee member comments here? All right, staff, do you have some comments for us? A little bit of a peek at what's ahead next month?
I will actually address that at your joint session, so I'll save it for the very end.
Okay. Well, then I think that we're going to call the meeting adjourned at 5:40.
Yep. Very good.
I think we're just waiting for the attorneys. You ready? Okay. Okay, I'd like to call to order the special joint meeting of the Design Review Committee and the Planning Commission on April 18, 2024.
Time?
Oh, time is 5:58. 48, excuse me, 5:48, April 18th, 2024. Okay, I think we're going to start with the staff. Roll call, please.
Member Lapp?
Here.
Member Kavanaugh?
Here.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Drayden Hess? Here. Chair Jacobson Bates?
Here.
Commissioner Adler? Absent. Commissioner Gold? Absent. Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Vice Chair Jameson? Here. Chair Williams?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe we just have one item on the agenda, and we will start with the staff report, I believe, tonight regarding our discussion.
Great, thank you. I have a PowerPoint. Oh, yes.
Oh,
We got-
okay.
yeah.
We did. All right, so are there any public comments on non-agenda items then in the room? Any comments on Zoom? No? Do we open it to public comments on the agenda?
After the presentation and comments from
Okay.
from both commission and the committee.
All right. So please move forward.
All right, so first off, thank you, commissioners and committee members, for joining us this evening. We have been asked to have a joint session to go over some of the many legislative changes to from both the federal level and state level, including judicial cases that affect the existing Solvang zoning ordinance. So I'm just going to dive right into it. First off, our zoning ordinance, for many that have had the pleasure to listen to me lecture, was adopted from the county's code back in mid-'80s. From that, the city went ahead and did a general plan update in the late '80s, and then finally culminated in getting a general plan adopted in 1990, along with a zoning ordinance. The majority of that zoning ordinance, however, was adopted straight from Santa Barbara County. During that time, there's been very little changes to our zoning ordinance. So we're now running on, let's see here, a good 30 plus years now of this ordinance being in place with little to no changes. As much as we don't want the world to change, the state legislature, particularly since the dawn of the 2010s, have had different things on their mind, particularly when it comes to housing. The current governor and the legislators in the both Assembly and Senate have determined that there is a housing crisis within the state of California. And since 2016, there have been a slew of housing bills that have been passed. Over 100 have been chaptered since 2016. And these bills range from density bonuses, the thing called accessory dwelling units, which used to be called granny units. Then we called them secondary units. Now they're ADUs. I'm sure we'll have a new name in 10 years. And then another thing called objective design standards, which was alerted to earlier this evening. Lot splits, project streamlining, you name it, it's been thought of at this point in time. Other planning related legislation that's not housing related comes to general plan. So fire safety is one that's been brought about, particularly after massive wildfire incidents. And then also a slew of homeless bills and also just many other bills that affect the day-to-day planning. In just this current legislative session that is ongoing, over 400 planning-related bills have been reviewed by the American Planning Association California chapter. So that just gives you a hint of planning touches a lot of our state legislation. But again, our code was adopted in 1990. Very little change has happened since 1990. And many of these bills, not bulls, have affected cities' staff ability to process the applications and be consistent with our adopting zoning ordinance. So as much as, we want to be, as much as we want to be in tune with the state, we just haven't mended our ordinance. We haven't tended to our garden. So some of the bigger conflicts that we have going is this idea of standards versus subjectivity. So just to get an idea of that, again, born from the legislature in 2016 and really modified in 2018, 2019, and 2020, was this idea of standards and subjectivity. The state legislature believed that there was too much subjectivity in a lot of jurisdictions' housing and zoning laws. So therefore, they amended what's called the Housing Accountability Act, which has actually been on the books since 1980. But they amended it to actually give some teeth. And of that, the jurisdictions are required to adopt what's called objective standards that involve no personal subjective judgment by a public official and be uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criteria available and known by both the development applicant or proponent and the public officials. So what that basically, in all that jargon means is if you as an applicant, not just a developer, I'm going to use homeowners, because many of you in this room are homeowners here in Solvang and in the Valley. If you as a homeowner come in and you ask, well, I want to do a home addition, you just want the facts. You just want your setbacks, how big can you do it, etc. Many of our many jurisdictions had what's called subjectivity in colors or light, or it can't be this close to the setbacks, subject to potential noise. And so the state legislature wanted to eliminate so-called ambiguity in codes in order to facilitate housing development. So that's where this argument of standards versus subjectivity comes in. And again, the biggest one was 2020 when the state legislature adopted the teeth to the Housing Accountability Act, and that's where this is coming from.
I'm not sure what the rules are. If we can interrupt to ask a question. It sort of comes up here because you say this is an outgrowth of the housing. Are we talking about the subjectivity and objective standards applying only to housing and housing-related projects?
Yeah, as alluded to our staff report, this actually applies to only majority housing projects. So that's anything over 50%.
Okay.
So a great example was the last DRC meeting we had, 10 Market Square, completely commercial project. All of our guidelines, all of our policies are in full effect. So again, this is just, at this point, today, it's residential.
Got it.
Can't speak for what's on the docket tomorrow. And even then, they're starting to chip away at that, particularly when it comes to mixed-use projects. So again, unless the colors, designs, et cetera, have an objective standard. And so what is an objective standard? Those are basically setbacks, building heights, FAR, which is floor area ratio, percentages of building envelopes, et cetera. If it's got an objection, that means it can be measurable by city staff. So you submit a plan and we can measure it. We cannot compel an applicant to make changes. We can ask all day long. And again, this is affecting all residential projects only. We can ask, we can plead, we can beg, we can sit there and berate. And in some projects, in some instances, a great example is 425 Fir, which is now, or First, which is now under construction at the corner. The DRC and the planning, the DRC specifically asked for changes. The applicant acquiesced, and we can do that. But eventually, you're going to run into an applicant that will not acquiesce, and that's where our hands start to become a little bit tied. So that's the difference between subjectivity and standards. Again, a great subjectivity question that always comes up is the view sheds. And so our code alludes to view sheds a lot in both the general plan and the zoning ordinance. Unfortunately, a view shed is not defined. An objective way is to basically then state windows can only be recessed by X amount of feet based on the distance from the neighboring house or property line, except now you're starting to talk about being objective, giving an actual measure distance that we can point back to a developer or homeowner as here's how you do it. Here's X, Y, and Z. If you don't like it, we'll give you a way out, but that way out is fraught with issues and exceptions that obviously then they're up to the whim of the board, and the board can either make the exceptions or they don't. And typically, when you have objective standards, they're crafted in a way that it makes it really hard to make the exception because that's the community character and feel that we are looking for. Hence why we want it to be objective. So the next issue that is coming about is by right projects. So we get a lot of folks that come in that ask about ADUs and why was an ADU approved that looks so ugly, and why wasn't there a public hearing on that? Well, that's because the state no longer allows us to have a public hearing on it. So city staff is required to process applications without discretionary review. So that includes accessory dwelling units. One thing that's kind of shocking that this community has not seen yet are the SB9 lot splits. And so for those that don't know, SB9 was a bill that passed in 2022 that allows for any zone that allows for a single family residence to split your lot, regardless of lot size. So, and then it also allows you to build up to 2 dwelling units on each split lot. And then there are caveats that go to that. So a great example on the split lot on the SB9 is if you do an SB9 lot split, and the intention again from the state legislature, bless their heart, is to facilitate housing. In practice, what I've seen this happen is it's typically an older family that owns the home and they want to pass a portion of the land to their kids. What's the easiest way to do it? Split the lot. So basically most lot splits in the past had to go through a rigorous public meeting schedule. That means the neighborhood or neighbors within 300 feet are notified and things happen. This SB9 lot split basically gets rid of that. And again, done by right. So you come in with a map, you don't sign a deed restriction, but you promise on a lovely little piece of paper that says you're going to live there for 3 years, and we have no way of checking to make sure you live there for 3 years. A fun fact. We have to then process it by right, which means that you bring in a final map. If everything looks good, you get a lot split. And typically with tentative parcel maps, you have to do improvements. Some of our parcels in our community that have street frontage, they don't have sidewalks. So typically we get sidewalks, we get street improvements when those parcel maps come in. State legislature has already said, you ain't doing that. So those go away as well. So you can see these things that we used to do in practice to get done through a public hearing process, through a fully vetted, open, transparent process, those are now going away, again, in the name of facilitating housing. The other big one that's on the docket is SB 684. Now, the state legislature, in their infinite wisdom, gave us municipalities 6 months to get it done. It's on my list to do. We're not done. So SB 684 allows for multifamily splits of up to 10 lots. This is a fun one, too. So again, this is by right, and this is much larger. And again, that's one-size-fits-all approach from the state of California, which unfortunately for communities like us, we have to fit into the mold. So until these are codified, we must follow these state regulations, which like in ADUs and the SB9 lot splits and even the SB 684, we actually, as a municipality, have some latitude to put in standards and put in actual sizes, max size SB9 lot splits. We can actually put in a max size of a home, but we actually have to codify it first. And so, but until we codify it, now we're up with.
It's by right.
It's by right, and it goes to state standard. So there are ways that we can fix it to fit Solvang. It's just, we just haven't decided to play in the sandbox for the longest time. We've just said, we don't want to play. Well, unfortunately, we need to play. And so that's part of this by right project that needs to get completed. So there are many amendments that are required at this point in juncture. Luckily, our adopted housing element goes through many of these things. The first and foremost is adoption of objective design standards, and that comes from SB 330. Allow for low barrier navigation centers. So that's having to do with homeless issues. We actually have to allow this by right in mixed use and multifamily zones. And unfortunately, HCD is looking for that. So that's a part of our implementation program over the next 7 years. We need to get it done. If we don't get it done, we are in danger of having a decertified housing element and being subject to builder's remedy. We have to allow for 100% affordable housing developments of supportive housing. So those need to, again, by right, AB 1262. Another big one is removal of CUP requirements for all multifamily and mixed-use projects that provide a minimum of 20% affordability to low income households. And the reason and rationale for that is CUPs provide a lot more onerous regulations. It takes a lot longer. So the state is smacking a lot of jurisdictions to remove the CUP process, to which, again, if we modify our code, we can make it work in the way we want to do it. Allow lot splits and ADUs in compliance with SB 9. And again, city staff had attempted to do an ADU ordinance back in 2020. Never just got picked back up. And those can definitely be contentious. But at the same token, again, depending on how we want to do ADUs, they're very much a fabric and a tool for many homeowners to live in place. I myself, if you don't know, I have an ADU in my home, and I actually built it for my mom, so she can age gracefully in my home with her grandkids. So that's the intention of that. But it's done in guise of local rules and regs. So we would need to put that in place. We need to allow for residential and mixed-use projects to meet all the provisions in compliance with SB 6. I believe SB 6 is another lovely housing flavor law. So again, doing things by right, allowing things to go quicker through the entitlement process, those would need to get completed in compliance. Emergency shelters. This has actually been on our housing element docket for now 2 cycles. We have no, and I'm actually really shocked that HCD hasn't really come and smacked us down yet on that. But we need to allow for emergency shelters at least allowed, permitted by right in at least one zone. And typically what has been done to do this is they've in practice, and I've done this in 2 other municipalities, is we placed it in the industrial zone over an overlay zone and gave it roads and regs, and it's there. And in one jurisdiction it never happened, and the other one actually did. But again, this has been actually on the docket since 2012, I want to say, so it's been a while. Allow for transitional supportive housing in compliance with AB 2162. So transitional supportive housing typically are group homes. Currently right now it's 6 or less that are allowed by right. Guess what's on the docket in 2024? It's to change it to, I want to say 9 or 12 is the number that they want to change it to allow by right. So again, that we would have to change that as well. And then finally update our subdivision ordinance to reflect changes consistent with SB 684. And again, we don't have many multifamily zones, but multifamily property owners could take advantage of that starting as soon as July 1st. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions of commissioners and committee members on our lovely state mandates.
Those 2 sections up there on this, the last, go back. Yeah, that 65,913 and 65,852, those are monsters. I mean, with your citation, I looked those up, and those are really very tough. I mean, they don't take up very much room on the page, but each of those are 8, 10, 12 pages long, single spaced, and really very aggressive.
It is, and again, the likelihood of a project like that coming to Solvang is slim, but we have to allow it. And so, and this is discussing, now we start talking about affordability projects with prevailing wage, et cetera, to be permitted by right. So again, these are different, is it likely to happen? Maybe. In practice, usually it doesn't, simply because, again, that prevailing wage is the big, huge, like, ooh, that's double the cost of housing right there. So, but again, it needs to be in the books, so.
Well, I think the memo that you and council prepared is really good. I think it would be great, if it's possible, to put this presentation up online. Is there any reason you can't do that?
No, we can most certainly put it online. But again, the point of this discussion here is to field questions, and particularly knowing what is up in our pipeline, what is coming up. This does affect Site C, Wildwood, as it's called now. This does affect, currently we have a pre-application that is going to be coming in soonish on Copenhagen for a vacant site in the TRC. So these affect these projects. And so again, we will try our hardest to make the comments to fit our design EOS, as I like to call it. But ultimately, in the end, it will be up to the developer to either say, yeah, I'll do it, and we hope that they do, or not, not doing it.
So my question, which I don't even, if it's premature, is, the thing that we all recognize is that the code, we have to, all these things have to be codified. That while we're waiting for whether it's standards for signs or design or housing or whatever it is, that we're in this limbo land. So I guess 2 levels of question. What kind of time frame do you anticipate that some of these areas will start getting to the point where there are regulations or rules that are codified so that there's teeth to what we do, rather than just saying please, please, and how do we proceed? This is I'm gonna be asking this later in specific cases, but we're in this kind of interim no man's land here, when we just are asking people, from what I see, to comply with what we had understood were the rules that now may or may not apply. And tonight's sign ordinance was kind of an example of that. And we'll see if the applicant decides to push and come back for an appeal to the city council, which I believe is, the next step and option.
So the first question is when we're looking at,
Yeah.
Working with Randy, the city manager, we and the city council, as a part of their goal setting session, they've made code updates a priority. So in our upcoming budget, we have allocated funds to bring on a consultant to do this type of work. Usually this process takes about a year to do. That's just the honest truth. And that's with no real participation. When we start getting, and both the planning commission and the DRC are very, you all, kudos to every one of you, 1 for serving, but 2, being active participants. Because when you're active participants, that means we usually end up getting a better product, but at the same token, it takes longer. And our citizens are much more engaged, which is fantastic. And so that's how we get a better product.
I just want to say something here. Some of us worked our families off.
Speak up a little for me.
Yeah, loud.
Sorry. Some of us worked very diligently for the general plan update, and it went nowhere. Are we going to have the same situation with this? We're going to start working on it, and it's not going to go anywhere? When I say it didn't go anywhere, the people gave up. They gave up because they were not being listened to.
You mean committee members?
Yes.
So, I can't speak for your general plan update, I wasn't here, sorry.
You're lucky.
I don't think I am, actually. Honestly, it's a good general plan. That's one. It sets us up for success, and I'll put that. So,
But we didn't even finish it.
it's actually going to public hearing in June. That's part of my update. We're done.
Well, I think
Thank
part
you
of
for
what,
finishing it.
yeah, I think what Joni is saying is that there was a huge amount of public or committee engagement and a lot of energy put into the general plan from the advisory committee. And looking at that as kind of the bones for what will happen with these updates to the codes and kind of an overall framework to guide some of that. And it kind of just stopped. So that's a whole different subject, but we would like to circle around to know, and it sounds like we're gonna get a little bit of an update, and have the committee kind of come to some kind of finality with, or finish.
Resolution.
Yeah, resolution, yeah.
Well, it's a pretty unique situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I sat in GPAC, a lot of us did for 3 years,
Yeah.
and we had issues, and we had problems with staff, and we did not fulfill staff positions, and we had city managers who were filling 18 different roles, and we were left hanging. And because of that, state stepped in to cities like ours, and others have maybe even tried harder and said, well, you guys dropped the ball. And because you dropped the ball, then it reverts to state mandates, the big one. We're not talking about signs right now, we're talking about housing. The
Right.
big one is the builder's remedy. And that was the hammer. And we on planning commission, us three, have dealt with this for months and months, and now city council, we kicked it to those folks and said, you guys deal with it, and they've had to deal with it. So, that's moved on. There's some new things that are coming up, obviously, on some lot splits and some other things, blah, 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 blah. That concerns a lot of us. That is dictated by state. Some of us on planning commission don't want to be on planning commission anymore because 80% of what we do is dictated by the state. And we're worn out, we're tired, and we're just like, wow, there's really nothing we can do because this is pretty much objectively set down. My hope is that from a DRC, is that we do have more subjectivity if we get in front of these ordinances to try to at least protect our cities from design, because that it has nothing to do with housing, it has nothing to do with homeless shelters, it has nothing to do with what the state is really focused on. You got some freedom of speech issues, but we can, if we jump in front of that. So I'm not trying to derail and say the housing is not important. That horse has left the barn. We missed that thing a while ago. And we ought to hopefully get in front of some design elements that we can control the city and do. Because housing is not in our control. It just is not.
Right.
I mean, the builder's remedy is, it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. And all of us in the city are guilty that we didn't step up and do a better job 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 18 months ago. And Rafi's saying, golly, I wish we would have been here on this general plan and stuff. We do too.
Yeah.
We wish somebody would have been here, and it's nothing on picking on anybody, but that's the reality as it is. So that's why our general plan advisory was frustrating for a lot of us, and it's frustrating us on planning, and it's frustrating for city council, and we've just got to now deal with it and move on. So I'm happy to go beat the dead horse again, but I'm telling you, that thing has happened. We ought to get in front of what we can do, and thank goodness that our city manager and our planner and our staff are going to help us on that, but that's gone. I mean, I'm tired of getting beat up at parties over it. I mean, truly, come on, how many arrows can we all take?
Well,
I mean, before we all just walk out.
And I feel like with the design component, that we kind of are in a builder's remedy kind of
We're right there.
area
We're
with
right
that
there.
as well. So that's what really concerns me with these major projects on the horizon that are going to permanently impact the way our town looks, feels,
Correct.
and
Right.
moves.
Correct.
And we need to have the ability to have a spine in the conversation, and we need staff to back us, and we need to know how far we can push and how we can help push along the process as well from the perspective of getting things codified.
Yeah, and my follow-up to that is, so what's the ask, right? So how can we prioritize what needs to be prioritized to hit the ground running? It's fine to read this, it's fine to understand it, it's a whole nother matter to do something. So what's the action, what's the ask, what do you need of us, how can we help?
So we don't get behind again.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yes.
that's what,
And
and
it's
I'm just,
And-
And we're not criticizing
no, I'm
No, no.
here,
No,
no.
we need
you guys, which is
information.
great, we're so glad you're here. But, we went through hell.
I asked for the mic 5 minutes ago to address Joni's comment directly, and that is, and Aaron touched on it, it was a completely different administration, it was a completely different council.
Yeah.
I'm here
I'm 10 days shy of a full year, by the way, just so you all know. I'll be celebrating my birthday in 10 more days, right? But the point is, you know, we've got an excellent planning manager. He's helping Lisa and staff to improve in the way we process things. One of the things we're going to ask for during the budget process is an additional shared administrative staff between planning and public works so that we have the ability for Raphael and his other staff to be able to dive into these things, this code update, which was high up on the list of priorities. We see it, we recognize it. We're going to try and get ahead of this as much as we can. We've got a July 1 deadline on that one issue, and we're going to do our best to meet that, or beat that, I guess. So you have a commitment from me and from Raphael and the staff that we're going to do our best to prevent a repeat of what happened with the housing element. You know, and as long as I'm here, you know, we're going to continue to try and stay ahead of it. And I hope that you all understand and recognize that we are receptive to comments and suggestions. So to the extent you're aware of those things, you know, it doesn't hurt to give us those prods too. So we're going to do what we can to keep it from, like I said, those who do not remember history are condemned to repeat it. I think it's George Santayana or something close to that. So we don't want to be there again.
So to answer your other question, Joni, as well as Esther, so I actually spoke and reached out to a couple colleagues, one specifically that does this for a living. They actually ran my previous life's objective design standards, and they asked, does your community have a clear objective of design? And I said, absolutely. I have a draft community design element that has actually been vetted and completely run through the rigor. That's where you start. And it was a plain face, because the ask was, well, how much background information do I need? He goes, nope. We're using what we already have to move forward, because that's been done. The hard work of the GPAC will flush into this next step. So while right now you don't see the end product, it's going to come. And so, but this process is very much an engaging process. To example how we did it in my last jurisdiction, and they were in the same boat, just like us. And a lot of jurisdictions are in the same boat. That's the other thing to sort of always remember. We're not the only ones.
It's not much comfort.
We're not the only ones. And that's okay, and that's okay. But what we are is we're only one Solvang. We're the Danish capital of America. That's it. There's no others. So what that means is that we kind of already know what we want. It's just how do we formulate that? And so the way it worked for my former jurisdiction was it was a series of meetings, of workshops with the Planning Commission specifically, and obviously that will kind of be here, but much more evolving into the DRC. And then joint workshops like tonight, and also workshops with the council. And us checking in, are we doing this correctly? Is this what you want? And then unfortunately, ODS is like a baby, it's like a child. God, I hated those days. But you gotta let it walk eventually, and you gotta let it hit a couple corners in the head. It's okay, doesn't need to have foam on it, and you kind of, we'll learn. And as those ODSs were adopted, I quickly learned, oh, that's not going to work. And so we had to write a couple policies to explain certain things, and then unfortunately I left before they codified it, and that's fine. They're on their own now. They don't have my brainchild. But you know, that's how we're going to learn. And so it does take time, and that's the biggest thing. Is this takes time. And the other thing that I want to instill is, while it takes time, this isn't just the one work effort. It's not like the 4th grade, report on the Minotaur, and I call it a day, and I'll never ever do it again. We actually got to keep tending to it. Every single year, every 2 years, we go back and we tend. We look, we review, we modify. This isn't set in stone. This is very much a living document, and we can very much come back to ourselves and say, does this work? Does this not work? If it works, cool. Let's maintain it. If it doesn't work, then how do we make it work better for our community? How do we make it work better for our businesses? How do we make this better for our homeowners? That's what hasn't happened in 30+ years. So, and as far as your ground rules, I'm going to use Denmark Square as a very good example. That was an amazing job by every single DRC member to provide input, provide poignant input, but at the same token, us as city staff, we kind of laid out the ground rules for you. We kind of, created a staff report to say, this is what we reviewed, here's what you need to review, or say yay, nay. When it comes to those projects, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, when it comes to those residential projects, we will lay out those ground rules. Here's where it meets the setbacks. Here's where it meets the building envelope. Hey, this landscaping, how do we sub this out? Because landscaping isn't subjective. We can use the little things here and there. And then for the items that we are recommending and highly recommend, and we can make a very clear and strong message to our applicants that we highly recommend this style. We highly recommend this be completed. We strongly urge you do this. And that's how we finesse it. That's how it's going to get done for the time being. And then unfortunately it's a 2-track process. And unfortunately, even after you adopt it, it's still a 2-track process, because there's applications that are in process that after adoption, they get to pick and choose. They get to choose whether to stay with the old one or go with the new one. And if we do it right, they're going to choose the ODS, because we create it in such a way that we don't have planning commission meetings anymore, because it's a done deal, because you've done it exactly the way we want to see it. And the only time the DRC or the PC needs to see it is if they're asking for an exception. And you better have a very good rationale and reason for an exception. Because in my opinion, from a city staff perspective, if you're not meeting those minimum standards that we've already blood, sweat, and tears over, there better be a good reason. And it's not just an economical one.
Well, what happens too is our boards change, and so therefore a board, to your point earlier, a board, I'm not saying this, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 8 years ago, might have approved these signs, and these ordinances should live beyond whatever board is there. Because it should be there. It should be a living document that they can certainly do this, but it shouldn't just be a whim. And to this gentleman's point tonight, there probably are some signs that are exactly like his, and he's going to be saying, well, why? Well, your point was 2 wrongs don't make a right. Well, we got to have some findings. We got to have some reasons, but you got to have that backup. And we are lacking some of that objectivity. I would agree. Because from an applicant standpoint, I've been in front of y'all many times for buildings and signs, and I know it pretty well, but I sometimes am in shock left, right, and sideways, and you hope you have more clear understanding from an applicant standpoint too. Makes your life easier too, makes our boards easier. I mean, we're much more objective on planning than you folks. I mean, just because it is subjective, because it is a design review. We're just taking a measuring tape out, I think, is what we're doing. Usually. Yeah, pointing at them and saying they decided it.
Well, so then I kind of have a question maybe for our attorneys that, was not a good time to necessarily do it during the meeting tonight. The process that we took to arrive at our approval for the sign that was aluminum, for a portion of it in direction to utilize other materials. Is that a good model for going forward during this kind of limbo time when we have old guidelines that apparently we can't use and new ones aren't fully in place?
Well, I think from the standpoint of the sign tonight was a good example. You have to make certain findings to approve the sign. You were able to make them in one situation but not in the other. That's permissible to do that, because if it were a non-discretionary situation, there wouldn't be a hearing. It wouldn't be before you at all. Staff would have signed it across the table. So you looked at it and you said, it does meet it in this situation, it does not in another situation. But I think when you're talking about objective design standards, signs are not going to be that for the most part. That's something that you're going to have a little bit of discretion in, but it's going to be bounded or guardrailed by the Constitution. So you have to look at it, and there was a little bit of discussion, and I should probably introduce Taylor Folan from our office as well. Taylor's done a fairly deep dive into the sign code and highlighted some issues where the Constitution may be butting up against our existing regulations. So what we as staff try to do, at least in the legal side of it, is say, okay, yes, that's what it says in the code. Let's find a constitutional and legal way to get to that point to reduce the risk of litigation against the city. So I'll give you an example from another jurisdiction, just so you understand the challenge that we have. Every election season, people start putting out their election signs, and they just put them wherever they want, and they put them out, 60, 90, 120 days before the election. Well, this city had a code that says no election signs more than 45 days before the election. And it was written into the code. It was in the municipal code. And every time the election would come around, I'd get complaints from members of the public saying, I saw an election sign. It's 90 days before the election. It needs to be removed. I said, yes, I know what it says in the code, but that's not constitutional. The courts have told us we cannot enforce that for two reasons. One, First Amendment issue, generally. But second, in order to determine that it's a political sign, you actually have to read it. You have to look at the content of that sign. We don't have that type of restriction for open house signs. Those can be up for a period of time. So you're differentiating on the content of the sign in that situation, which is not constitutional, even though it shows up in the code. So that's the delicate balance that we have to look at. Same when we bring something forth to you. We look at the code and we have to interpret, is there a constitutional and legal way to get you there? And if there's not, it may seem like we're being resistant and we're not carrying out what it says in the code, but that's not the intent. It's not to stop you from doing your job. It's to protect you and give you a way to make a decision that can't be attacked later on.
So I've got a lot of questions on signs, but I don't know if this is the right time. I don't know if you want to, circle around a little later.
Yeah, we'll wrap up here really quick. So the last thing I wanted to say very quickly is about By Right project. So Aaron, you alluded to it, and I know a couple other commissioners alluded to it, is, well, what's our role, what's our job? Essentially, this process, this code update, will ask that question. Again, looking at other jurisdictions and looking at state law, we currently have require a development plan for a single-family house. That takes time, and so that's what the state's looking to reduce. So we kind of need to begin asking ourselves, what is it that we as a community, what are we comfortable with? Are we comfortable with, if we have objective design standards, to just say, you meet the standards, cool, you just go with the building permit? Are we comfortable with, well, does the ZRC need to see the objective standards so they could just, bypass that? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. And then the other question is, okay, not just single-family homes, but what about multifamily? Because remember, it's trying to do all this together, because remember that SB9 lot split, I want to do an SB9 lot split, I can legally do 4 units by right. Nothing, no one say no nothing. So what's the difference now between an SB9 lot split or a 2-unit housing development that could get 4, what's the difference between that versus just allowing someone with a multifamily lot to just develop 4 units on there if they meet the ODS? Do they have to go to the planning commission? And these are questions that other jurisdictions grapple with. What is that threshold? In my previous jurisdiction, 4 was the threshold actually. They didn't want to see subdivisions of 4 or less anymore. So yeah, go knock your socks off. They didn't want to see single family homes anymore because again, we want to encourage housing development. They even there was unique that jurisdiction wanted additional development in their downtown. So they even said, hey, you want to do 8 mixed use units or 8 all, in the downtown? Have at it. As long as you meet ODS, you don't have to do any public hearing. City staff, we trust you. Cool. But is that appropriate for Solvang? I would argue no, it's not. So we need to figure out what is appropriate for us. And then again, becomes those questions of, okay, are our standards good enough to let city staff say, single family home, you're good, you've met the standards, we don't need to see you because we crafted a set of standards that we are okay with. It's the same with multifamily. how many multifamily units are we okay with that we want to do by right? Because the state wants to see you do everything by right. But we have that latitude to say, no, we don't want to, we're going to put a limit on that. Is that limit 2? Is that limit 4? Is that, no, I want to continue to see every single multifamily. That's something that we have the power and control over. It's just a matter of what do we want to see, and what ultimately collectively do you as a committee and commission pass to the council, and then is the council okay with that? And then we'll move forward. And if, again, like I said before, if it doesn't work, we can always come back and revisit, and that's okay. So we'll go from there. Are there any other sort of housing questions related to statutory requirements? And again, loud and clear, Esther, about boundaries. And we as city staff, myself and Lisa, we will, and Lori, our planning consultant, we will definitely, as these projects come forward, we will provide you that information right off the bat. Typically, what are our ground rules and how we can wiggle around them to hopefully stay on the good side of the law. Aaron.
Oh, did you want to say anything about SB4, just as an addendum?
Which one is SB4?
The religious institution subdivisions?
Oh, you can have fun with that one.
So I could editorialize about the pace with which Sacramento has made our jobs more difficult. But SB4 allows land held by educational institutions and religious institutions to now subdivide for residential purposes. So churches can split up their land and put housing on it as well. You see a theme from Sacramento. They're looking at every opportunity to make housing more available. So as I was driving with Taylor around town tonight, I looked at all that open space right next to the mission, and I thought, yeah. And then I think of the Lutheran home, and I think, well, there's a possibility there too, because it's held by a religious institution. Sacramento's not nearly done with us. And when they're working full-time on these types of things, and they have consultants who are generating, to your point about the length of those code sections, for us to be able to go through and track that has made our jobs dramatically more difficult. And when, as I said, Sacramento has devoted staff that are doing this, nothing but 24/7 on housing bills, we have other things going on in the community that we're addressing that makes the job that much more difficult. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I see that pace accelerating. Just as an aside, the state of Nevada legislature used to meet for 6 weeks every other year, and then they went and did their other jobs. It resulted in a much slower pace of legislation, but Sacramento seems to be 24/7. They're like the 7-Eleven of legislation now. They never close.
Well, and the impacts are so different from community to community, too.
Absolutely.
Right. So on that housing thing and the design review, I mean, I kind of understand the planning role. What is our role in the residential, unless I'm not quite sure that we have much of a role there.
Well, if it's a development plan, you do.
Okay.
If it's not a development plan, single family,
right.
I would agree.
Development plans are tricky because multifamily requires a development plan.
That's right.
Right.
So, case in point, Site C, that requires a development plan.
Yeah.
And in my code, it says it needs to go to
Here
you
it
for a
goes.
recommendation.
Yep.
Yeah.
What are you recommending? I mean, not to make a joke about it, but I mean, it becomes the honest truth. What are you recommending? Are you just recommending the objective standards that met the setbacks? Oh, hey, by the way, they're asking for a state density bonus too, so we have to magically waive two standards too on top of that. So those go away too. So that's a good question. I've asked Dave and Chelsea, how do we manage that? Yet at the same token, affording this transparency, because that site in particular, that project in particular, has a lot of what I call energy, and good or bad. And a lot of residents are charged, good or bad, over it. And I am a firm believer of the public planning process. I'm a firm believer of transparency. And so I believe every resident should, even if they don't like it or if they love it, they still have should have the ability to come up and say their piece And then from there, unfortunately, our rules have to hamstring, you know, what they do and don't do.
Well, I think of a positive outcome on a family or multi-unit residential was that property at the corner of Fifth and Oak that originally came as a box.
Oh, yeah.
You know, white box with red railings, and the applicant redesigned that significantly.
And I think a part of it too, for us at least, is also looking on how we as planning staff bring applications to everybody. I had this discussion with Public Works earlier today on what is the pre-application review process and why do we have that? And I think a lot of, and so for those that don't know, we have what's called a pre-application review. It's actually a fee. I don't know if it was collected or not by previous staff, but it's a fee for a reason, and that reason is this. It gives us the ability to, one, review plans, run it through our code, flag if there are any issues, and then also I pass it on to both utility and public works and building to see if they flag any major issues. And the other thing that, what I want to take with these pre-apps, and I alluded to one, is then bring it to the DRC. Because now, you could recommend things because it's not an application. And you can provide that really hardcore feedback in a pre-application form and say, hey guys, we need the housing, can you make it look like this? And it gives that, and again, but at the same token, we've given that service to them that we've told them, hey, by the way, you're gonna need to upgrade a water lateral. You're gonna have to upgrade a sewer lateral. You don't meet the side setbacks. Your elevator needs to be masked based on this, this, and this. And so the pre-application review, while it costs the developer money up front, it usually provides for much more positive outcomes for reshaping the way housing looks. And ultimately, in the end, the developer ends up, or the homeowner, they end up getting through that process a lot quicker because now we've given them the kitchen sink and they know how to run and they come back with what we're looking for. And therefore, it reduces our review time, it reduces the entitlement time, and they're out quicker to building plans and getting things done. In my previous life, we used that pre-op project for major mixed-use projects to which the committees there majorly reshaped a couple of them, and they got the message very, very quickly.
Ralph, is our mixed-use projects, because they become 50% or 49% residential, or whatever that number is, do they then fall under less scrutiny from a design review because they're mixed use?
If it's
That's
more,
where it's
50% or
heading.
more, 50% or more.
But if it's under 50%, DRC still has
They
control,
got
correct?
latitude all day long.
And our ordinance, even in our general plan, we kept it at a 50% in TRC, at least, where we care, of being, I think, housing. That's what I recall, to give DRC some control, more
Right.
control.
Yes.
In the TRC.
In the DRC.
TRC, yeah.
TRC.
So
Yeah.
TRC.
the language specifically says promote residential uses.
Yes.
So the nuts and bolts will say 50%. It actually will allow more, but with the ability to, that front needs to be commercial.
The
And
street
then
front.
the street front, yeah. Or if it's horizontal, you know, so
Right.
vertical,
Right.
horizontal. For the time being, we could write in until objective design standards, and this is what it sounds like you would like me to do.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is keep it at cap at 50.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so
For
then,
that control factor.
Now we have
over.
it.
Now, that may change. State may come in and say, if you have any mixed use at all, there's no design. You know,
Right.
just,
and
it could
so,
happen.
and that could be the interim until the ODS
Yeah.
comes in, and
Right.
that, again, these are our tools, let's use them.
Yeah.
So,
But be aggressive about I'm not aggressive.
Assertive.
Don't be defensive,
Aggressive.
right,
Yeah.
right. Be proactive instead of reactive, so that
Right.
we're,
Yeah.
and that's what we lost it on the other part.
and
Yeah,
that's actually, it's a good point. Because in my head, it's like, oh, we should be allowed uses, so therefore it needs to be second floor above, and I can make more than 50%, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It sounds like we don't want that, so now, thank you for the feedback. As I
Yeah.
go and be master chemist in the next 3 weeks.
Well, And that's why I mentioned that about the general plan, because we spent a lot of time really thinking about those things with the intention that that be kind of a model or framework to build off of for all the other
Of what
aspects.
we wanted, of what the city wanted.
Yeah.
Of what the constituents wanted, based on the workshops. I mean,
That's right.
It's not, wasn't just the GPAC, it was
Right.
all the input from the community. Like,
Yeah.
think about all the
Yeah.
number of people that showed up to give their opinion, or do a survey, or do the, I mean, it
Those
wasn't,
got lost.
it wasn't just the GPAC.
Those all
We
got
worked
lost.
hard.
Well, some of that was
Yeah,
integrated in.
some of it, yeah.
So with that being said, so that's great feedback, thank you. Because again, as I said before, a lot of work's been done, a lot of energy on the general plan, but I said, hey, there's like 4 or 5 steps afterwards, and those are the more important steps. God, I wanted to do this short presentation, but I thought I wasn't professional. There's a meme out there of a wrestler, and he's laughing, and that's our general plan adoption, because we're so happy that it got done. But then there's a figure in the background just waiting to beat the crud out of him. That's our zoning ordinance implementation, because that's what it is, because that's the hardest lift from here. And so, with that being said, we are gonna have to tinker with the zoning ordinance right now as a part of this general plan amendment. And so this 50% idea of capping it allows us to maintain the control while we tinker with the next step, which is the actual blood, sweat, and tears of the ODS.
Well, especially the DRC, what I read and the stuff we got, the legal arguments, is that if we have a objective standard that the city can defend against, to say this is what our goal is, that whether it's a sign or a design, because of you're in Solvang and it's this Danish community and this way, you can then defend a lot more your signs, your design and stuff in the TRC. I don't know if you can take that and go down to non-TRC, because how do you defend and say, well, that's part of our objective of having this little we've already recognized there's a TRC and we've recognized there's other. So I can see that hopefully that we can defend and strongly more defend our goals and objectives that in our TRCs. I'm willing to just make a line and fight that. You can't fight the whole thing. Let's just pick what we can fight and defend it, and be able to defend it objectively with a standard that we don't have an ocean, we don't have a lake, we don't have a mountain. What we have is we have Danish design or Northern European or whatever you want to call it to compel us to be able to keep our design review strong in that zone. We've lost some fights just because it's outside. And how do you defend it?
You can, but there's a couple caveats and purposes around it. The first caveat is, as long as it doesn't reduce density. That's the biggest key.
Correct.
And the second one is economical cost, correct? That doesn't impede cost.
Yeah, it doesn't make it
impossible
If
to develop.
Yeah, so those are sort of our 2 boxes that we're working on from ODS. It's my thought as a practitioner, and again, now I'm really deep diving, sharing that's what's in my head, is as much as we love the TRC, from a design standpoint, we just don't want to say, put up the walls and then everything else goes to mush. You actually kind of need a transition. So what does that transition look? Well, if when you do objectively and you say, okay, a half mile off the TRC and you identify these are the type of standards, you can have 2 different types of standards, Mission, Danish, etc. And then the further you go out, you can start reducing your standards more and more and more. So again, that's one way of creating a unified look. At the same token, objectively, you can, and again, when I say objectively, it's not, oh, the pitch of that roof isn't, I don't like the color. It's, the pitch needs to be 30 degrees, it can be up to 15 degrees, and the type of roof material is slate, is composite gray and or thatchal and it's very rudimentary. I can measure that, I can measure that pitch between 15 and 30. And so say, within a half mile, oh, I want those pitches better. If you're doing this style, those pitches need to go up. So then you elevate the pitch. And then you say, no, the windows need to have crossbars, panes. Again, panes that are spaced out between 6 and 12 inches. Objective. It still gets you where you need to go, and it's still, you're able to pass that. Is it much more intensive? Yes, it most certainly is. So the question you need to ask yourselves, and myself, is how intensive do we want to get? And on the outlying areas, if we're okay with the outlying areas being not as intensive, those are incentives to development, then that's what we want to do. If you want to incentivize certain type of development, infill development, then maybe you should back off a little bit, but depending on where that incentive is closer to TRC. So give or takes, et cetera, but very much you still have that control. You just got to figure out when, where, and how to do it.
I have a question. Is the funding of the consultant a code consultant or an architect?
We'd have to do an RFP.
Okay, so there's not somebody engaged at this time? Okay.
There are consulting groups that do both.
Yeah, that would be my preference.
That is
Just
also
because
my
to the
preference.
point that you made, right?
Mhm.
The more direct and specific when needed, the better.
Right. And so again, that's the way how we formulate our RFP. Again, using our community character, our draft community character design guidelines as a good reference point, that's usually where you start. I may have some firms in mind, but again, it's an open process, so we're gonna go through that process, so.
Invite them.
We're pretty, on the planning commission, we're pretty objective at this point. We feel pretty comfortable. I don't know, I mean, watching you folks tonight, I haven't been to many of these, unless I'm an applicant. It's pretty tough right now. I mean,
It's very tough.
to your folks' point, we talk about neon signs and LEDs, we're talking about, can you do raised letters, can you not? We're not specific enough. Is there anything we can do? You asked that earlier, what is the ask? What do we do now, if anything, to try to stop the encroachment? And then everyone gets to say, well, you allowed my neighbor and you allowed him, well, why not her and why not?
Exactly,
them?
it's the dissolution of the brand,
Where are
which
we?
is why I
And
I
is it
keep
emergency?
trying,
Yeah.
right, and the argument, right, is because it existed, or because there's practice.
Right.
To me, is that a strong legal argument?
Well, is
in
that our
terms of-
focus,
and-
is
and
that
then
our focus
Raphael-
tonight,
Yeah,
right
but
now?
also
Yeah.
Raphael said, and then you could tweak this going forward. How, in the context, can you tweak it if someone's gonna argue precedent or practice, or how does that even work?
Well, I'll answer that.
There's a legal question, that's
right.
Yeah.
It's not a precedent. Plain and simple, it's not. It's in the same vein of getting pulled over for speeding and saying the person next to me was speeding.
Was also-
Why didn't they get a ticket as well?
Oh, I wish we'd said that.
I felt like I was on thin ice, but
No, and so it
We
comes
were
across,
pushing,
and I don't wanna, I don't have a degree in psychology, but people want to be treated equal in equal situations. They like to believe that there's a level playing field, but when you're talking about things that have some level of discretion, for example, you can have objective all the way to the nth degree and everything is objective, but that's taking away the whole point of having a DRC. You're looking at something, you're trying to maintain a community character by looking at what you can control. And you know what a wooden carved sign looks like. You know what something that has dimensionality, can't say that word well, you know what that means. And that's what you're trying to provide, but to actually codify that can be a little difficult at times. And so when someone comes in and says, I have no idea what you're saying, there's no standards for that, someone else did this, you are trying to interpret the code that has been passed by the city council in a way that protects Solvang's brand.
Right. Yes,
exactly. And so when someone comes in and says, well, my neighbor got away with this, great, your neighbor shouldn't have gotten away with this. Well, my building, my next door neighbor's building has composite shingles on it. Well, it shouldn't have, it should have been slate. The mistakes of the past do not dictate the future, and it may not even be a mistake. It may be an oversight, it may have been a policy decision at that time, but what you're given today, you do the best with what you have. If changes need to be made, then you tell staff, okay, we're having some difficulty here. Talking about what is dimensionality, defining that. What does that mean? It means something that has a three-dimensional character to it rather than a two-dimensional character. That's more objective. You can define that for someone. Something
that old world charm, you can define that. You walk around Solvang, there are ways to objectively do that to an extent. Color schemes, you can look at Pantone numbers and say, this is the accepted palette, that's an objective standard. Those are the kind of things that you will have the input into that can provide staff an opportunity to more accurately guide applicants when they come in. That, hey, if you want Pantone 7225, that's not on the approved palette. There may be an exception that can be granted under this reason, but that's the objective standard. That's not going to be it.
The DRC folks, because a lot of us have sat on that also, want that. They
Oh, we
want
do.
that. They
Yeah.
want that support to be able to say.
Right.
We haven't had it for a while because of staff changes. That they're out there hanging in the wind, thinking, can we say this? Can we not say this?
Right.
Well,
and agreed. And so
exactly.
if we can just get to that, I trust in the 5 folks that are on the DRC now and next year and the next year and next. But we got to give them the I don't mean backbone. We got to give them the support so that they will stand up and say absolutely not or absolutely yes.
And on that sign, you guys, is it okay to speak?
Yeah.
Sure.
On the sign, the big white metal one, why did he come before you with a plan, a drawing?
That was
Right,
my
that was
point.
Isn't that what's recommended?
That was
Yeah.
the
At the
point.
city level, when they come to the city and ask, I need to get, so I don't see how you guys approved it. I think it should have
We
been
did.
denied.
We did.
Well,
We did.
No, why not?
Well, you did one of them, and he's gonna go with that now, and then again, back to so grandfathered in means nothing.
No.
Well, okay, so if we're gonna get specific on terms like grandfathering, that is a very specific legal
Okay, yeah.
concept.
All right.
People will use it in the common sense in that, well, it's
Willy-nilly.
been there forever, it should be. Grandfathering has a very specific interpretation, so when I look at it, I'll look at it very differently. But, to your point, are you required, is there a legal precedent? No, there is not. But moving forward, you may get some pushback from staff, from legal, that if it says it in the code, that doesn't end the discussion. Sometimes we have to look at what's happened in the courts, what's happened in other litigation. From my standpoint, from legal, I will also gauge the risk. Is this a case worth dying for?
Yep.
Is this a hill worth dying for the city? And part of our job as lawyers is to identify and minimize risk.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if the client wants to take on the risk, then we have a litigation department too. They're willing to do that. But we want to be able to put all of you in a position where the decisions that you come up with are as immune from challenge as they can be. Recognizing that anyone with $500 and access to Microsoft Word can file a lawsuit.
But it's also, it's more fair to, from a landlord standpoint, we take a bullet out of my holster when I have a tenant who says that they're doing it and no one's enforcing that, why can't I do it? And so it helps the tenant know, the business owner, it helps the landlord know, it helps you guys know, if we just can try to remain, I know there's gonna be grays, but as much as we can. It's so much easier for all of us to be able to enforce it, because you have made the point, and I've said it many times to us, everyone just wants to be treated fair. We want a level playing field. How come my competitor can do it and I can't? Whatever it is, an A-frame sign, make it up. And so we just need to give, and if we have enforcement staff that's like, oh my gosh, please help us. No, we're all on the same page. Is how do we get to that point?
So-
On his, can you put it in the lease? You can't have a sign that doesn't, I can refuse any sign.
I
have it on my lease.
No,
I'm
but
not gonna
usually-
give you legal advice.
Usually-
No,
but usually
I
leases,
can't. I gotta
usually
approve my
leases will
signs.
say they will be compliant to code. That's really all the extent of it, usually. Unless you have a landlord.
I tell them I have to approve
Yeah,
it.
well, yeah, you do,
Yeah.
but also you usually generally overlay that on code and say, right, like if it is code compliant and you agree.
So it sounds like we're gonna get into signs, so.
There we go, sorry.
We have a comment
Dennis,
on
have
the
a
room.
quick comment there?
Yeah, not quick. Yeah. Two observations, I don't know, for your benefit, Raphael. Half the GPAC is here tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for the Word version of the the general plan update, so I can make a few more comments and correct the
Couple
existing
of
errors and
comments and stuff,
inconsistencies. The other observation is, it began with a litany of housing coming down your throat from Sacramento, and it morphed into nothing but a discussion of design. Interesting. My impression was, because it's shoved down our throat from Sacramento by the tens and tens, that there's nothing we can do in terms of codify, because it's already here, the barn door's open. So you left me that impression, and everything else was, oh, design, yeah, we can do that.
Well, we need to get in front of that before it gets
Oh,
shut
yeah,
down us
we can
also.
do design because Sacramento hasn't thought of that yet. But can we still do something in terms of local codifying of residential housing?
Yeah.
My impression was not.
No, absolutely. That's what I said earlier. The
Yeah.
problem is, we haven't done anything.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually have to do something to get control back. We haven't. Great example, and like I said earlier, in 2020, we attempted to do ADU regs. Where'd they go?
So you default to the state.
Well, yeah, that's what they did. Whoever, like the powers that be that were sitting in my seat decided, to heck with all y'all, we'll just do what the state does. But is that the prudent decision? No.
No.
It's not. I'm straight up. No, it's not. But I didn't make that decision then. But I'm here today to say, you need those regs. You do. Sorry, let's just do it. We'll get through it. We may not agree, and that's okay, but it needs to get done. So yes, to answer your question, yes, there are things we can still do. We just actually need to do it. Okay, so if we're gonna leave housing.
Okay, just to wrap that up, so yes, there are things that can be done. There's some deadline, in particular, there's the July 1 that has to be addressed first. Then are those, is there a movement to do that in an expedited fashion regarding housing? Is that part of hiring a new consultant or, excuse me, a person that?
It'll be a consultant, and
Okay.
yes, that's a part of it. It's actually, to save costs, it's a dual track, because we're gonna have to do a lot of legwork, to be honest.
Yeah.
And let the consultant dive into the nitty-gritty of ODS and design. But we have to do sort of the back-end stuff, which is, what does your permit application process look like? What do your tables look like? All those sort of nuts and bolts that need to get done, it's cheaper for us to do it than to have the consultant do it.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna be taking that on.
So what you're saying is gonna be at least a year before something's.
At minimum.
Yeah,
Minimum.
yeah, minimum.
And, yeah.
Yes, there are
Yeah,
things to be
I
done.
was gonna ask that, is it at a minimum? I mean, this, in theory, could go on for years.
Yes.
It can.
So what can we, as the Planning Commission and DRC, do to help you to prevent that from happening?
Well, and that's the biggest thing is what I've seen for the GPAC is one, it comes from us, like myself and Randy, having a little bit more, and Dave and our legal, having a little bit more skin in the game in terms of the ability to cross your comments and actually get substance to give back to the applicant to work, or to the consultant to work with. So that, a part of it is what I call project management, straight up.
Yeah.
You gotta have a strong PM. You gotta have a no BS PM. I will put on my consultant hat, and I tended to get a lot of work done as a project manager's consultant. But that's because we needed to work through the answers and say, okay, we have to find an answer to this.
Do you have, sorry to interrupt, do you have templates and things from your former role that you can at least get a jump start?
No comment?
No comment. No, but I mean, just in terms of a framework.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah, we very much do.
And then you have city council support in this as a priority, which I think is a really big thing too. Yeah.
So,
Thank you,
again,
Mr. Mayor.
that's where we start, is when we actually start getting into our workshops in public hearing, or workshops, work sessions is what I like to call them. We gotta come obviously nothing on the agenda, and we're gonna work. It is a work session, and it is to go through issues and get the work done. And it's usually, there's a couple issues that will hang you up. And at the same token, again, looking at our and again, that's me as city staff, it's Lisa city staff, looking at our processes concurrently and saying, we need to change these two at the same time and bring them back together. And unfortunately, there's a lot of work to do in the process. I know, I don't want to dive in from signs, but a great example was, well, the applicant, you know, signs are tough because usually it's the last thing on people's minds when they open up. And unfortunately also, I have made a change in the way we've done our sign applications. And that change is to not guarantee you coming to the DRC 2 weeks before and give you an application that may or may not pass muster. But unfortunately, that's still not being heard by our business community, and we're trying to get these as fast as possible. So understanding the comments that you made earlier, well, again, take it to heart. But it's gonna be a heavy lift. It's gonna be hard, but as long as we have strong players in the game and we get a decent consultant through the RFP process, we'll be able to do it, so. Okay, anything else on residential and state? Before I move on?
Sign, please.
All right, so I'm gonna go quickly on this because I don't wanna waste everyone's time. PowerPoint, please. All right, so again, now moving on to signs, as we sort of dove into this. Court cases and sign ordinance has been one large one that's looming over a lot of municipalities as of 2015. So just to preface, our sign ordinance was actually one of the ordinances that we did work on back in 2012. I was looking through our files. We actually had quite a robust working session back in 2011 with the Planning Commission to then work on things like civic event signs, A-frame signs, and those things. So that actually was born about, passed, and then this dropped, which is this court case, which is called Reed versus Town of Gilbert. If I screw up the preface, let me know. Basically, Gilbert is a town in Arizona. Reed is a pastor of a church. He needed to get more people going, so he put up off-site signage on places to get people to their location because their location changed. And he began to get cited for having the off-site signage. So then he wondered, well, how come they got signage and I can't? So it became a question of fairity, being what's fair. And so it came back with this court case. It ruled actually in favor of Reed. It really had to do with what's called content and messaging. There's a difference between commercial and non-commercial messages and content. So the real key question that we need to determine from legal and city staff is, does the ordinance language refer to content or the message of the sign? What is in that sign? And then if not, is there evidence showing the city adopted the regulation specifically because of a disagreement or agreement with the message expressed by the sign? Again, this starts to boil into First Amendment rights, copyrights, you name it. But the biggest takeaway, as Dave said is earlier on his example of the political sign, is if I allow an open house sign, gotta allow a political sign. So it's having this sort of content neutrality, the ability to exchange, etc. So did I cover it? Pretty okay. All right. This isn't my first sign area, by the way. And yes, I actually have experience working on actually 3 sign ordinances post-Reed. So that kind of helps us out a little bit. You talked about templates. Guess what I got? I got sign ordinance templates. So anyways, our existing ordinance points to contest-based signage. So again, we worked on this in 2012. Reed came out in 2015. A lot of jurisdictions, when Reed came out, went through the same sort of backlog. Okay, we got to go revise it. Some went really content neutral, others kind of piddle around. But again, it points to content-based signage, which requires a user, i.e. myself, Lisa, or code enforcement officers, code compliance, acting as the enforcer to determine what type of sign it is. And so our sign ordinance is littered with this. Civic event signs, construction signs, real estate signs, prohibition of specific words on a sign, such as HTTP or www. Prohibition of illuminated signs in the village area, which, had it stopped there, cool, but it didn't. So then it went on to say, yet allowances are vacancy and no vacancy signs for specific uses. Now I actually have to read the sign to determine if you're a neon sign, you're able to do it. So these things, at least from a city staff standpoint, we kind of make these decisions to say, is this content-based, is it not content-based? How much does this applicant have energy to fight this and start using their First Amendment right to say, no, you're infringing on this because your ordinance is content-based, and that the red flags start coming up. And especially when you have a very angry business owner who just wants their sign. And those are the arguments, well, they have it, they have it, they have it, they have it. So our existing sign ordinance is kind of fraught with some of those issues. Moving on, sign colors. If we had a palette, that'd be great, but unfortunately it says consistent with 18th century Danish Northern European design theme, but no standards highlighted. So again, this is kind of diving into the little objective standards. If there was an extension that said, hey, go see Appendix A for sign colors, and even if it was adopted in 1989 or 1985, they're there, the sign colors are there. I can always point back to that. But an applicant has fair game to say, well, you don't have an adopted standard, you don't have an adopted policy, etc. Our sign ordinance also talks about lettering, as traditional old world style is preferred. But again, the existing ordinance does not require lettering to be in the old world style, so it's not, you shall do it. But nor does it provide any sort of guidance on the fonts or types of signs you like. Yeah.
Can we change that?
Yeah.
Not the preferred old
But can
world
we
traditional
change
style,
it?
period.
Yeah, can we change it sooner, just a few little things?
So this is the next bullet point.
You really want to upset people,
Yeah.
you'll change
Change
it.
it,
I
yeah.
do
Yeah.
not recommend doing
So-
And I don't actually recommend that one.
I cannot imagine any company being happy that you're going to change their logo.
As pointed to by our
Agreed.
city attorney, there is this court case, Hudson versus Hudson Gas. We actually can have a compelling interest when it comes to commercial signage, not non-commercial message signage, commercial signage only. But what's our compelling interest? Look around us. We're the Danish capital of America. That's our compelling interest. That's our compelling economic interest. That's our compelling tourism interest. So yes, we do have a compelling interest. Just a matter of how do we get there? And so, again, the argument can be made that the city's compelling interest of signage needs to conform to standards that maintain our economic vibrancy, our identity through its regulations, particularly if we want to maintain those signage standards to evoke Old World Europe. But how do we do that? Fonts is a big one, and I since my started here, I harped on that because it is a branding identity. The company, that's the identity, that's what they're known for. We're going to ask and step out that they change it to their font size.
No.
We might be stepping into some very interesting legal territory.
Yeah, and I think we've had discussions about
That's
this, that
just
we've
not
had,
the sword, the
Yeah.
hill we want to die on.
yeah, we've had disagreements amongst our committee, but the reality is that that's something we can't do.
But
But,
what I would die on is having signs that are projected in 3D.
That's
And
right.
look wood material,
Yes.
etc., with your logo on there, and not even with the logo, just give me a size,
That's
give me a letter height,
right.
and give me a logo height, cool.
And the,
And maybe not LED and neon and
Yeah.
take them away from
Yeah.
hotels.
Yeah.
That's
You
right.
know, if that's the solution,
And
that's
that's-
the
And
solution.
not moving.
And
And
Dave
not
brought,
moving.
and Dave brought up a good point about grandfather, because while we can codify this all day long, and we can say it's brand new, I can't just send Jennifer or Eddie back out and say, hey, you gotta go change your signs.
right,
Because now
understood.
those signs actually do have a legal precedent.
The approved
Of
Right.
signs.
approved signs,
The
that
approved
we
signs.
grandfathered
Not the
in.
illegal
Yeah.
neon, but
Right.
the ones that we approved or whoever did 20 years ago, the same thing.
They
Right.
say.
And now there is a legal precedence for the non-conforming sign to remain
Right.
Right.
and to stay in place as approved.
Understood, yeah.
Now, if we want to go down that route, we can always put in an amortization schedule.
That's a hard one.
I can tell you,
Yeah,
don't
no,
want to do
no,
that.
You break, you
we
can't
don't.
fix them, no, you don't wanna do that.
No, what,
We don't wanna pick that
what
fight.
Raphael's talking about is you can say,
within 5 years or 10 years, all signs must conform. It's based on investment-backed expectations. They have to be able to kind of recoup their original cost. It's a nightmare. Where you have seen it is abatement of freeway billboards. We'll start to see a lot fewer billboards in parts of California because communities have amortized billboards. They've said, okay, we're going to phase these out. You're not going to be allowed to do them. There's other places where you know, it's like, I'll date myself a little, the Burma shave signs. You see them every 20 feet on the road. So it's what the local communities want their communities to look like. If this community said, we want all the signs in the community to contain this specific typeface, that is a police power that cities have. But do you want to die on that hill? Do you want to force everyone to do that? It will provide consistency, uniformity of design, and so on. But the more you push that envelope, the more likely it is that you're going to get a challenge to it. And you're going to get a case like Reed versus City of Gilbert, where someone says, I've had enough and I'm not going to take it anymore.
And I don't think that's the goal at all. But the aluminum sign today was a good kind of thing to come today of all days, because it kind of spoke to, and even though the standards for Old World aren't spelled out, I don't think anybody can say an aluminum sign is Old World, a shiny aluminum sign.
I think we were trying to get at an objective standard that was understandable to meet the current code to the best of our ability. That was the intent of the feedback, was to not be onerous, but to say, okay, to make it more consistent, this is what it needs to be, and I mean, it was what it was. But I appreciate the feedback that you guys gave, because it makes me feel better.
Yeah, and again, it puts our staff in a very precarious position, because it's very, and again, this is me being honest, having heart to hearts.
Yeah.
It's very rare for signs, all signs, to go to a public hearing body. It's super rare.
Yeah.
It's usually
Understood.
only if it's an exception, or
Yeah.
if it's, but we're talking all signs.
We're super rare here.
So, so with that being said, because that is it codified and that's how we've done it, and it's how we need to do it, getting that, and Lisa's fantastic with this, is letting applicants know way ahead of, hey, you got any signs? Let's get it done. And hearing this feedback again gives us a little bit more comfort when we look at it and we go, I don't know. And trying to go there and work with the applicants. But again, usually signs are afterthoughts, and they're trying to get up, here and there. But it is a part of our police powers, just how do we walk that fine line? How do we, neon signs is a great example. It's after conferring with, council, we had a couple complaints on neon signs. We started sending out letters to all of our neon signs in the TRC.
And LED.
LED, yes.
Yeah, because they really aren't neon anymore.
Yeah, so, it's those things that we walk that fine line, knowing right now that we do have an ordinance that on some things are just, we can't go there. So when we get a code compliance issue about certain election signs that are up in neighborhoods,
Can't do anything, yeah,
sorry,
understood.
not gonna.
So, on that signage and what currently exists, is there a way of adding in something objective that assists this with the conversation about it being wood look and dimensional? Can we add something like that without having a big drama, just to kind of utilize between now and when the full sign ordinance is done in a year and a half? It's this limbo period here that's difficult. And then the other part of that is the content. We need a better understanding of what content means. Understanding that, I don't want to regulate font. And there's some of our committee who doesn't agree, but we also know that from our conversation today, that's not something that is worth spending our time on. the old world look. What can we do?
Can we define it more objectively so that there's like an amended statement that says what that is?
The short answer to the question is yes. There are ways to get to that point and define it. It's figuring out what is the collective agreement on what that is. Because I can tell you what I think old world is. You can tell me what you think old world is. They may be radically different. But if I'm thinking about a sign in the old world fashion, I'm thinking of someone who has limited hand tools, who does not have a printing press necessarily, who is chiseling out a wood sign or chiseling out something out of bone, something that you can't just manufacture off the cuff, something that reflects some level of craftsmanship, some level of artistry. Now, how do you codify that? How do you put that into words? There are ways that I could come up with that it must be a sign that could have only been created prior to the year 1600 by a craftsperson.
Yeah. So
then you can go and you can argue, well, you know, if someone was really inventive, they could have smelted an aluminum sheet.
We're sitting there with their.
But that is an
It's an
objective standard.
iron
Is this a
sign.
sign that could have been created using the technology in the year 1600?
Well,
That's
but
fairly
it's
objective.
more like it's the aesthetic
Yeah.
of
Right.
that. It's
Yeah.
not the, and then,
Fabrication.
we also recognize that some of these businesses come and go.
Right.
And there's a
Cost.
substantial fee to apply. There's the cost for doing it. I'm sure that aluminum sign with the vinyl letters was significantly less expensive than anything made out of the other materials. What we find so frequently happening is the signs on the wall, the business is open, and people are very angry when it isn't, I don't know if angry is the right word, they're upset. Like today, it's like, you mean I gotta make a new sign? Well, yeah, you shouldn't have made your sign first.
Yeah.
At least he actually had it here, it wasn't glued to the, down the wall, because most of them actually are. So, we have a picture, so this was kind of the exception.
But that was a discussion point relative to being sensitive, that the standard itself should not be so, we don't think, so onerous that it's maybe $1,000 premium or something, like having an understanding of actually what we're going to ask, how much of a premium is that gonna put on someone? Because we are sensitive to that businesses come and go, and you don't wanna be so exhausting and expensive to them that they're like, God, it's just not worth doing business in Solvang, right?
And that's been feedback. Again,
Yeah.
that's,
So we feel
that's
it, so we,
feedback.
right, so
Yeah.
we feel that, so.
we've had applicants come in and say, I can't afford the sign person. I just can't.
That's a problem.
And so
Yeah.
That's, well, you're opening a business, there's gotta be a cost of doing business to some level here.
Yeah, but I think there's a problem with competition with the sign vendors potentially.
Okay.
That is a
It
potential
could be,
issue.
but let me tell you, there's
Or
also,
lack thereof.
there's
Lack
also
thereof.
the feel that, well, that person or that family has the money and they're gonna have to have a better sign. And that person who just moved into town is not gonna have the better sign because they don't have the money. You can't do that.
No.
You just can't do it. I mean, you gotta be treated
Yeah.
fair across the board, and if it's a reliefed sign, whether it's foam or wood, that's what it is. If it's three-dimensional, is it the pinned-on letters? Is it the glued-on letters?
Right.
If you want three-dimensional, you gotta stick to it, because once we go down that road, then you've approved those signs that are aluminum wrapped, like a car gets wrapped, because they're sign people, you can do that. $50, I can do aluminum
Yeah.
wrap sign, I'm just telling you what, in every business I have, they're not expensive at all. The others, Morton's Bakery, 10 grand.
Oh, I know.
Okay, that double-sided, 3-inch, we're gonna do that, because that's what we're gonna do. But you gotta have standards and hold to them and not say that costs somebody too much money. Because to Max's point, it's gonna cost X amount, and it just is gonna cost X amount. It's not, a $500 sign is not that expensive compared to everything else that you're doing. And a $50 sign is silliness.
Well, so the point is that we agree that it should be high quality, we just didn't want to make the standard so onerous
I
that
agree.
it was, like, for instance, we're not saying this, lit from below, right, without any obstruction, certain dimensionality, maybe not an inch and 3/4,
Maybe
but 3 inches,
3
or,
inches,
yeah, like
whatever it
something
is, yeah.
intense that would then be such a premium that it would be kind of ridiculous.
Agreed.
So it was more about being sensible, but still maintaining the character again. So it's like, we're trying to find that balance without being overly,
And again, people that are coming into town, that want to open a business, as long as they know that that's what it's gonna be, that's the cost of doing business, they can make that decision.
Yeah, right.
If they see their neighbor's got aluminum with a
Yeah.
wrap, you're right, then they've been tricked.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
angry, they've signed a lease already.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, and I think too that the point that I made to the applicant today, that I've been trying to kind of repeat to people who aren't, kind of conforming to the kind of old world look, is that you came to Solvang because you
Right. No,
came
good
here for
point.
the business
Good point.
environment.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That
for
was
the
strong.
people that are attracted
Right.
here, what attracts them to our community? It's the uniqueness of our little Danish.
So figure that out,
Yeah.
Raphael.
yeah.
You gotta write that up for us.
Well, I
Simple
mean,
as that.
Yeah, and again, how do we go about,
Right.
obviously, these signs, trust me, hear you loud and clear, 3D, non-aluminum,
Wood look.
Wood look,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, those things, but what is wood? It could be UHD. it could
Yeah,
be-
right, it just has to,
That's why
the
I'm
appearance.
Could be-
The appearance.
Agreed,
there's a lot of materials that could be, and again,
agreed.
that's
As an
important.
example, we used to have wood carved signs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Foam came out 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
everyone took foam because they last 100 years instead of.
Oh, yeah.
But it still looks
We
the
don't
same.
care.
Right, we
We
don't
don't
care, right?
yeah, we don't
So-
care what it's made out of as long as it meets the standards and is, safe and,
And then
codes all
again,
that.
if they come to you with a sign saying, "Well, we want a picture, we don't wanna see your sign, we want a drawing of it so we can approve it. If you make a sign, that's your problem. They need to come in and say, what are the rules of coming into town? I think most people realize they're gonna put a sign up. And is it a second or tertiary thought in their brain? I don't think it is. I think their sign is always first. They need to figure out how to do that.
You would be amazed.
The amount
Well,
of
yeah, but I don't care about amazing. This is the
signage
rules.
that you get as a tenant is top of mind.
Well, it's their brand.
Yeah.
And I think some of the most
But
successful.
what happens is, they walk into town and they say, I want to lease that space,
Yeah.
and they look at their neighbor who has an aluminum sign that's wrapped.
Yeah.
I
Well,
go to
there's
Santa
not that
Barbara,
many.
there is a
There's very
ton,
few.
there's a
Really?
ton, no, there's a ton. I've opened those 2 restaurants in Santa Barbara, and there was no way I walked around and said, there's an aluminum sign, they were all wood carved, so I knew, I was unnoticed. We've let it slip. I'm not blaming you guys, maybe I was on DRC when we let it slip, but we've let some of that slip.
Or maybe some of it's
So
just
people
there.
don't know, to Raphael's point, they don't know when they come in that this is what we're gonna do. If you see them all hand carved or blown, you're gonna notice, not here.
Well, and
We've
I,
had,
one
look
of
at
the,
menu boards, look at a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that's
Yeah.
going on in town, I'm just telling you, they're up there.
well, I think that the,
Maybe more to content.
you know,
I didn't want to put that out there.
I think the Chamber of Commerce could potentially be a partner that helped a little more with this.
They have a
They have a
handout,
link.
they have a flyer, if they go in there and ask them, she'll give them a flyer.
Good.
And I would think anybody opening a business would do a little homework rather than look
Right.
around. And if you do look around, you go, wow, that sign looks different than that side,
Well,
I don't know,
I
you gotta be
think,
smart businessmen to come in.
and some of the businesses that have done so well have, that are newer, have embraced what makes the community unique in their branding and their logo and their business name, and, kind of an obvious is the Spice Shop, and Joy opened the new Cat and Hund, the,
Right.
cat and dog store, and is doing fabulously. I love that example because she built her business brand based upon what brought people to the community.
Right.
Does she have Danish goods? No. She doesn't need to. So back to,
Okay, well, that triggers it. Can you use pictures? So in other words, we create a diagram that is actually the, the detailing of the band, the thickness, basically just create a schematic of the blank sign.
That's typically how a
Sign
good
ordinance should be.
sign ordinance does
Okay,
it.
that's what we should do.
So you have a template, so
You
to
just
speak.
you have a schematic
Oh,
of what the
it's-
dimensionality of the sign is, what the banding looks like. It says what the materials choices can be.
What it is it just basically shows you how we measure it, but then also, again, there are many ways to do this if you recodify, because you could always punt to a handbook that's adopted by the council, but now we can modify the handbook as we go along. So there, again, tending the store, tending the garden, we just haven't done that.
Well, we have that book, don't we? We have a book.
We do.
We just haven't,
It's not that
we haven't
detailed.
guarded it, as you say.
Yeah, but it's not that detailed.
It's not
Well,
detailed.
okay,
That-
but we have the book, we have the essential book, we just
Right.
need to.
Yeah.
Right.
Fill in all the blanks.
The problem is the book runs into the content issue and other
Okay,
things, so we
right.
gotta
Yeah.
unwind the two together.
That-
So,
Because anybody who wants to open a business, Solvang, don't they come down and ask you, wouldn't there be some kind of a package for them? I need a business license, I need a sign, follow these rules, isn't that, don't you give them that when they come and ask for what kind of?
usually let me put
That'd
this
be
very-
really great if they did that.
Let me put this very nicely. Usually businesses or municipalities that are thinking of putting those packages together have already done that. We don't have such a package. We used to, but it was never digitized. There were a couple errors in it, et cetera. And while I'm always a firm advocate of doing it that way, but it also comes back to, again, there's very quite often where it is the very last minute, and I think it just happens more often than most people realize. It is the last minute where they're asked, I need you to sign, how quickly can I get onto the DRC?
What do you mean we used to have them, and we don't now? Where did it go?
We had really good packets before, and we just don't have it. And it kind of got into a fight of it's gonna be the visitors board, the chamber, it's gonna be the city. And I mean, this has been going
Okay, so
forever,
then
and it's
the
really should
chamber
be.
has it.
It doesn't matter, it should be the chamber. Needs to be a government agency, because they'll take the chamber and say, this is what the chamber said, and you guys say, we're not the chamber,
Right.
this is a city ordinance.
Right.
So it's gotta be a city-generated packet that does it. And there was a time, 3 directors before, that we were doing that. You're absolutely correct.
Correct, so.
Where'd it go?
It's there, the problem is, it's incorrect.
Right.
So when I looked at
Based
the
on
back
all
end, I'm
this.
like, oh, this was awesome. Oh, that's wrong. And so it's.
It was intended.
Again, good intentions.
We need to grow it.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm just gonna put it bluntly, I only have so much bandwidth. I'm only one person, Lisa's only
Correct.
one person.
Correct.
So the more we start piling on workload, I'm gonna need another person.
Oh my gosh. Lisa.
Ready?
Just work on weekends.
Get him another person, ASAP, please.
It's a half a person.
Can we visit neon/LED signs and how that, is there a way of crafting an ordinance that disallows them except in hotels, and of course not stated in that way? Is there a workaround here at all?
You're essentially differentiating among the signs based on the message they're conveying.
Yeah,
And that's what you run
understood.
into.
Can't do it.
If you wanna,
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that when it comes to commercial speech, you do have slightly more leeway when we're talking commercial versus non-commercial. Non-commercial is afforded much more protection by the First Amendment. Commercial, slightly less so. So non-commercial has this very high bar you have to meet if you're gonna be regulating based on content. Commercial, slightly less, although it is an unsettled and developing area of law. So you do have these kind of guardrails where you could attempt to create a regulation that may touch on content, but whether you have the justification for that regulation, that's the big question. And aesthetics such as the Danish style are kind of seen to be kind of substantial government interests, but it's whether or not we're able to kind of cultivate that justification for the content-based regulation.
Well, I guess you could look at it from the form of, the bed taxes are a major source of revenue in town, and it would be in the interest of the community that it be
I completely
known.
didn't understand what you
Yeah.
just said.
So-
So what was that? I mean,
So, yeah, so just to clarify, so
Lawyer
we're,
speak.
we're talking about kind of two different standards here.
Right.
Commercial speech is regulated a little differently
Right.
than non-commercial speech. So there could be a bit more leeway, in theory, to regulate, kind of touch on content with commercial speech. The caveat being is that we have to sufficiently kind of support the reason for doing so.
Is there,
And that's the question, is whether or not you're able to support the
And
reason for doing so.
vacancy from a hotel means open from my restaurant. It's the same thing. So you
Exactly,
don't let
so-
them, I can't say open, but they can say vacancy. That's unfair. And we don't, hotels, take it away from them. Everyone's doing this. No one's driving by looking for a vacancy sign at 2 in the morning anymore.
Yeah.
Where it's not a motor thing
That's
anymore.
true.
Nobody goes anywhere without, it's not a big deal. Half the new hotels, they don't have
outdated.
vacancies.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
trying to, I'm thinking about Hats, I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, they redid theirs over there, or Lansby. I don't see a vacancy sign.
No,
I mean, because people aren't doing what
Yeah.
they used to do. And those that have been approved, fine, but we shouldn't allow me to have open signs in all my restaurants just because hotels, and that argument, but the argument can be made if we allow vacancies and not open signs. And if I was somebody who wanted to argue it, I could argue it. I'm a lawyer, I just go do this.
But you just
I'm
can't
not
have a-
gonna do it. But, so we need to nip it, and we have nipped it, and just outlaw it for every business, my recommendation. You don't have an open or a vacancy sign, you don't have neon at all. You want to have a vacancy sign, it's hand painted, I don't care. You can have an open sign that says that.
Right.
And then
Well,
those that have
maybe-
been, those that are approved are sitting there, and they're gonna be there, and they are grandfathered in, because they're legal signs that say vacancies. There's not another open sign that has been approved by you folks in 10 years. So those signs need to come down, unless we want everyone to have them. I mean, I know, maybe I'm being too, it just seems easy to me, you know.
No, you either have to let them all have them or
Correct.
nobody gets them.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would like
Correct.
to see nobody
Correct.
because of the choices.
And if you make a policy decision like that, you say, no neon signs of any kind.
Right.
I can defend that.
Exactly.
Right, that's
Well,
right.
and
very
it's like it's
Exactly.
neon
Yeah.
slash LED.
So-
You know,
Right,
that's-
whatever the
yeah.
definition.
And
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
The more objective the standard, the easier it is
Easier
to
to defend.
defend, and also just the easier it is to implement in the city, the expectations for the applicants. When you get into those more subjective or content-touching standards, that's when the defensibility might be more questionable, and also the expectations of the business community and anyone else applying.
So then a no vacancy sign could be, just have a light behind it,
Yeah.
lighting up the no.
Yeah, or front lit.
Because they can say can they say vacancy?
Yeah.
You say open.
Yeah, on a wood
Is it
sign
No, they
with
can
a
say
light on
whatever
it.
they
So-
want.
Yeah.
We're arguing no, the way
Right, right,
it's
yeah.
lit.
Yeah.
Time and place.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Con-
Yes.
Yeah, it's the, so you're regulating based on, you disallow it everywhere except for where it says vacancy, no vacancy. I have to read it, if I have to read the word vacancy, that is content.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that can't say
So
no
it's
to
either
that.
you
Yeah.
nip it or you allow it. So what ends up happening now is we have these signs, which, again, we've gotten a complaint. We went around and we issued letters to all of our open signs and all of our neon LED signs.
Does that
But we
include
gave them,
hotels?
no, because right
They
now
get
they're
permits,
exempt.
and they're exempt right now.
But our code allows for an exception, and that exception goes to the DRC. So DRC, in theory, if I see the letter and I see the vacancy sign that said, well, they got it, I'm gonna, you know what, I'm gonna fight this, I'll pay the exception, I'll pay the fee, and I'll go before DRC, and they make that argument, that puts us in a sticky wicket.
Right, so right now, the no LED, no neon slash LED is being enforced in the,
Under the guise of compelling interest of, you know, our
Okay.
community.
right,
But
and
it's
maintaining
a
these.
sticky
So,
wicket.
And those that have been approved 20 years ago, 3 years ago,
right,
hotels are grandfathered in because they got approved.
Oh, so they are?
Oh, of course, if you got them
Oh,
approved. If you didn't get them approved,
Wait.
is that
may
true?
be something that you want to recommend to the council. It's like, okay, for the ones that are there, neon is not consistent with old world Danish heritage. Put in an amortization. In 5 years, no neon.
And that's when you're saying, don't do that. He's saying, just let them sit.
But with something that specific, if you were gonna go in all signs, yeah, that's gonna be painful. But if you were to say, 5 years, no more neon.
10.
That's, well, whatever the year is,
I think
whatever the
that's too
possibility is.
long because
If you
it-
provide that path, then you can phase those out over.
Right.
And that's just a process that, you know, that
Done,
our offices
do,
have to
pass
talk
that,
to.
I'll sign.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, but does that apply
Get
to
it done.
the open sign in the bakery that's LED though? See? If you have
Because
it.
it's not, was never legally.
It's never
Oh, because it's
permitted.
never,
They're never
that's-
permitted,
okay,
they're
okay.
not grandfathered
Okay.
in. They have to have a permit on,
It's too late,
with the city.
I'm not,
Yeah.
That ship sailed a long time ago.
yeah,
So.
okay.
There's
Yeah, because I
another
think-
category of lighting. I bet you I could find a plastic sign maker that could make a beautiful wood-looking three-dimensional sign that could be lit from the inside.
Internally
It would just
illuminated?
glow, so you gotta, I think you don't want that.
Not
So it's
allowed.
already not allowed in the
Yeah.
TRC?
Yeah, it's not allowed.
No,
Yeah,
Internally lit signs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
those
that's
already,
not allowed.
those are already mixed and they're not.
Yeah,
within
which
the
is-
TRC.
I've already learned not to ask for those.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just thinking of the next meeting, the next meeting, the next meeting, you know, the meetings that are coming up in the interim while all of this is being developed as far as codifying and our signs.
I'm hearing, again, as I stated earlier, I think this is good to have an open session, much needed, especially for someone like me that's new, unlike Randy, he's old now. Year-wise.
In a week he will be.
Veteran.
Yeah, he's a vet, I'm still a rookie. I think it's good for us to hear this, because I come from a worlds of time is money and businesses mean everything, so thou shalt go get those done for businesses ASAP. I think it gives us the ability to pause and reflect and be able to provide those comments, say, look, the DRC has made it clear that they are looking for this type of sign. So we highly recommend that you change your sign. However, if you want to continue to push. We'll take it to DRC. But we can leave recommendations blank and we
Okay.
can just.
That would be my big request, is that anything that's non-conforming to the current codes and anything that, based upon our kind of robust conversation today, that staff not be recommending approval of a project, especially like the big bank sign today.
Signs.
Yeah, signs, it leaves us in a position where we don't, I feel as though our responsibilities are, we can't meet them.
And again, you can always go counter to staff's recommendation. I
Yes.
mean, it's, again,
But.
no skin off, and sometimes that is necessary. Because when you come back and you say, well, we want to see you come back, and they never come back,
Yeah.
then they do what they want. That's hard, because that puts the business owner in limbo, because the business owner may think that, well, they haven't said anything, done anything, but if you come back with this, no, we're denying this, then that triggers a whole different subset of outs, because what that then says is, okay, you've denied it, then we as city staff procedurally per our code have to issue a notice of a letter of denial, and we have to give them their way to appeal that denial, give them their due process.
Right, understood.
And they can then exhaust their due process. The next step is the council. And if they want to pay the fees, they go to council, they go to council. And that allows then for us to, if they want to continue to exhaust all the remedies and then they stop, then that allows us to, unfortunately, might have to go down the code compliance route of.
With the aluminum sign that
of
they put up
getting
anyway,
compliance,
kind
but
of thing.
we
Yeah.
have at
Not
least-
saying that that's happened.
Right, but we have at least followed the due process given
I
to
guess
applicants.
my request of staff is that there not be recommendations given, because it gives the applicant a false
False hope.
sense. And that makes it a more difficult
more
conversation,
adversarial.
much more, like today. And it didn't become adversarial with the bank, but it's kind of because we just bowed to it.
Rolled over.
Yeah, and I, in the future, something that's so far out of compliance, I understand the reason that it was replacing a sign of same size, but our attorney just told us that that isn't precedent. So in those cases, it would be really helpful if staff did not make a recommendation or made a recommendation of, that was to deny it and ask because we've never seen that.
But even the argument was good, what you said about the sizing and the scale, that was a really salient point.
Yes.
And I would have rather said we could approve a 15-foot or a 17-foot sign and given that direction than approved two 25-footer and a 17-footer. I just felt so, I felt like I'm in a box of, okay, it's either this or that right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that's the common sense approach of government, where it's like, okay, give it a metric. And most municipalities have, especially outside of their downtowns or if they have heavy pedestrian activity, what our sign limitations are, to be frank, they're spot on. They're completely spot on. As in size, the way they need to be located. Those, a couple tweaks here and there. But for the TRC generally, like it's there size-wise, the amount of signage. That doesn't need tinkered. It's the other stuff that's outside where it's like, how come this isn't tied to the square footage? Oh, it's an arbitrary number of 12. Why? I can't tell.
Rather than being based on the scale of the structure.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Yeah, because then that becomes an easier ask for staff, because it's like, well, make it to the size of the building, make the linear square footage. Well, I want it bigger. Okay, well, give me a really compelling argument, and I'll take it to DRC with a compelling argument, or I can get your signs approved because it's to the standard. So and we've started to do that. Lisa and I have really harped on, especially applicants come in, well, I want a bigger sign. Well, you can.
How long do you want to,
And that's typically been the argument. Do you want to get it done quicker?
Well, you guys can make exceptions.
We
If
can,
it's in
right?
scale, you can
Well,
go
we
bigger.
just did today.
That's what we do.
Yeah, we did
often
today.
you do
They
that.
did that.
Yeah, you do it all the time, and you do more of it outside of the TRC.
Yeah.
I mean, where was that?
We did that on US Bank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big buildings. Yeah.
But these are things that what I'm almost getting at is, as we move forward and knowing that our code is really content-based, menu signs, great example.
Yeah.
Then we need to start thinking through, okay, while the wall sign is fixed, we may almost need to increase it based on, adding additional signage that we don't call it a menu sign. We call it additional wall sign, like ancillary wall signage that is not attached to the that is not above X amount of feet can now have an additional wall sign that's X square feet. I didn't call it a menu sign now, did I?
Right.
Regarding menu signs and content, I don't care what they want to say in the menu sign. All we control is a time, place, manner. Here's the size.
Right.
Here's what we can do. You can't have A-frames. You can't have neon. You can't have LEDs. You can't have more than one or two, whatever the menu sign says. You can have a chalkboard changeable, but they're 24 by 36, whatever those magical numbers are, very objective standards. I don't care if he's saying Able Skivers or Fafla. I don't care what he's selling. It has nothing to do with me, the content of it. We can just do that. Those, to me, should be enforced tomorrow. And I know that we're maybe jumping the gun, but we ought to be out there enforcing those folks now, of those that are in violation, clearly in violation of our off-premise signs, or A-frame signs, or our menu signs, or whatever it is. We should just be, or the neon signs, or the LEDs. Forget about the hotels right now. We're gonna deal with that thing, because that's sitting there. Let someone bring an action that they're not special, and they're not special, that we're gonna grandfather them in, and we're gonna outlaw them to everybody under the law. But there's no A-frames that are grandfathered in. There's no LEDs other than hotels or neon that are. I mean, there's no off-premise signs that are ground. No one's had those approved ever, and we're not doing it. I'm not picking on staff. I'm just saying it would sure help for us to. You guys are talking about the new stuff. I'm talking about the stuff that's in violation right now.
Yeah. Well,
We
I
had
think
it's a two-pronged thing.
I
You guys
actually
get your
think-
stuff together, but give our code enforcement person the thumbs up, or the people, thumbs up to go do their job and feel like they got, that we're giving them our back, and city council's giving the back. You know,
I think
that's how I
that
feel.
our code enforcement has really been working hard. We also have some people, business owners, that no matter what, they aren't complying.
hard,
And there
yeah.
needs to be a
Yeah,
team of
$10,000
that.
fine. I mean, you
Well,
mean
and
just
the-
wait, $100,000 fine. Give it on the landlord. I mean, if we're gonna have a law that I can stop drunk driving on the San Marcos Pass by cutting off everyone's leg who gets convicted of drunk driving on a Friday night. No one's gonna drive drunk on that pass. You can make the
Might have
punishment
to
so hard
appeal
that we
that.
will make it happen. We buy houses because we get to deduct interest payments. The government can do it. We just gotta have the will to stand up and say, do we care, or is someone gonna just say, forget you, I'm not gonna do it, and our city goes, well, he's squeaking, she's squeaking, so we'll pick on the people that don't squeak. That's wrong, because then we're not treating people fairly.
Well, and maybe staff has some comments on that. Code
Code
enforcement.
fines, well, we are.
I'm treating people fairly and enforcing against everybody and not just one or two.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
it's a brief comment.
It's an obvious answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, we are trying to treat everyone, at least since I've started, trying to treat everyone equally
Perfect.
and trying to get the message out and work instead with what I call voluntary compliance. But there are a few individuals out there that just don't want to voluntarily comply. And so.
And being a cop is hard, and being a prosecutor is hard.
Right, and so we need to go through our motions, and like I said, give them the due process. And so we've started that process on a few of them to give them the out. And if they want to take up the out, they take up the out. They'll go before the DRC, and if they don't like what they hear, then they,
Appeal.
and then exhaust.
Go to
And
court.
then it becomes an easier job for us to then say, okay, you got 10 days to remove your signs. Oh, okay, one last 10 day.
Or we will move them,
And then.
and we will store them.
Well, that's what I was saying.
I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
what's our enforcement. I've heard different things. Can we enforce by removing signs? Can we take signs? Can we not? Can we just say, please don't do it, and then we're done?
So, I look at code enforcement as a continuum of force. I can put people in jail for violating the municipal code. I have that power as the city's prosecutor. Have I ever put anyone in jail? No. Has a judge ever considered that they would put someone in jail for violation of municipal code? Probably
Well.
not. You do get some people who say, I'm not going to comply no matter what, and the courts will address that. But it is a continuum. You try to resolve it at the lowest level. Also keep in mind, though, that there is a cost to the taxpayers for that program. If we are spending the city's legal budget on pursuing a sign, we're not necessarily defending other things like water rights or making sure that we have defensible housing regulations and so on. The city doesn't have an unlimited budget, so we, as the city prosecutor, are given some discretion to pursue these, but we can't go spend $100,000 pursuing someone on a fine like that.
Can
So we can't take them.
In all due respect, though, you allow one or two or three, you're gonna have 50 that are violating it. And then, at some point, we're gonna say, God, we have 50 of these. I mean, nip it in the bud, or let's just rip it up and say, don't have that, you can
If that
have
is
those.
if
It's one
that's
or
the
the other.
policy direction from the city council and city staff.
I hope it
We want
is.
to go and, it's not make an example of someone, but
No.
prosecute a clear violation of it. There are ways to do that. I am currently involved in that battle in another community where someone has been doing the proverbial nose on the thumb for years towards the city. And the city says, this is the one, this is the time that we're going to
There's the line.
continue pursuing this person. So there is that possibility, but it does require policy direction. I can walk you through downtown Solvang and find hundreds of code violations that are
Yes.
unrelated to signs, whether it be building code, but it's a question of, is that something that I am going to use the power of government to abate? Is it something that is severe enough that a court will back that up if there's a challenge against it? And this is the metric that I have to determine when looking at code enforcement issues. Yes, there can be violations, yes, they should be remedied, people should just follow the rules fundamentally, once the rules are set, if they're legal and constitutional. Do people do that all the time? No,
No.
they don't. So it's that tenuous balance in code enforcement, that you try to resolve it at the lowest level possible, and move up the ladder if they don't.
If we find somebody for a sign violation, we'll make it $500, they don't pay it. We have no way to enforce that.
You have-
Other than
you
you
have
could go
set-
small claims court.
Small claims, if it's an individual, you can put it on their tax refund through the state, there's a program. You can assign it to a collections agency, get 50% of it.
Can we find the landlord who owns the business, the building, because it's a violation, and it goes on their tax lien, so now they're the enforcement officer to their tenant? Is that possible?
There are ways of doing that. It requires real specific due process
For a lien,
situations.
okay.
Yeah, the state of California is very reluctant to allow local governments to put things on the tax rolls. Because
Gotcha.
there's this whole set of procedures involved. It can be done. The state has given us that power. Solvang's a charter city. It has a little bit more leeway in some of those things. But again, it's a matter of resources and which hills you want to die on, so to speak. Once the policy direction is to unleash the hounds of litigation, we're happy to do that. But we have to remember who's paying our bills. It's the taxpayers, fundamentally. And we want to make sure that we're in step as attorneys and prosecutors, that we're in step with the desires of the community as represented by the city council and by city staff. If we get out ahead of that, then we're abusing our position, we're abusing the taxpayers. So I want to make sure if I'm going down that road.
The city council supported that push.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. I
Okay.
completely agree, because once you have 1, 2, we have more violations now than we did 5 years ago. We can, just make that excuse. It
Well-
doesn't matter, that's done.
It's pretty well known in
It's pretty
town
out there now.
Yeah.
that you can get away with anything.
Anything. Because it's been a
We've
slippery
got
slope.
codes, we've got regulations, and everybody knows they're not enforced.
Well, I mean, and it's a slow change. I mean, with this last, code compliance action we did, not only was the business notified, but the landlord was notified too.
Good.
So, I mean, it's those things, and those are policy
That's
changes we can
improvement.
institute straight up when we start sending out these code violations, not just for signs, but everything that if it's gonna get a code violation, you're gonna get a letter, there's a little CC sign, it's gonna be the property owner. And that way the property owner now starts to get involved and understand that, hey, what's this letter? And they can do a little bit more forceful changes than what we can. Again, ultimately, from a code compliance standpoint, it's voluntary compliance, that we're really looking for. And always working with our property owners to get a little bit more creative if we need to. And that's always been the
So just to clarify, that if there's a sign, and I think of the A-frame type signs as being the biggest violators, there's not the ability for that to be confiscated, for lack of a better word, after a certain amount of violations? Can that sign just be literally taken away?
Is it in the public right of way?
Yes,
If
some
it's
of
in
them
the
are.
Public right of way.
If it's
Say
in
it's
the public
not.
right of way and it's the city's property, the city can control the use of city property. If it's on private property, it makes it more complicated.
Yeah, so, to me, that there's, a couple of, one in particular egregious violator, and it is often on city property, and I would just like to see it,
And
it's been for years.
Code compliance, what I've directed them is if they see an A-frame sign or other sign that's out in the public right of way, they notify them immediately. Usually 9 times out of 10, don't comply. I say 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's a harder issue, and
No, you're right. I've got tenants who have complied, and then they go to me and say, they haven't complied, I'm not, and they're putting them back out. And I'm fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
I got no bullet in my holster.
I think the
Or
other
they comply and then a week later it's back out
That's
again.
right. Exactly.
I think the other thing too, especially with the sign ordinance, is when you do adopt a new ordinance, you're able to then get the message out. New ordinance been adopted, you work with the chamber, you get notifications like, hey, and then we're gonna start enforcing this in X amount of days. And it's the time frame, and then it becomes hey, you're out of whack with our ordinance, please have 10 days. And it's a slow get there, and then eventually you start unfortunately finding. So-
Okay, I have one last question, I'm not sure if, but in lieu parking, the projects that we have ahead on the design review and same with you at Planning Commission are, some of them are very much based on in lieu parking. And knowing that there's a shortage of parking in Solvang and that the existing spaces, some of them have been sold multiple times in lieu. What are the options? How does this impact, especially when we think of, a couple of the big projects that are on the horizon here are very much relying upon in lieu parking?
Well, and the add-on for me was, we had a parking study. I know we had feedback, we had data, and we haven't done much with it. So that was the other thing that was lurking in my brain, was like, we did the work about finding out, right?
Well, we allow.
3 times, 2 times,
But
yeah.
we allow in lieu, what ought to happen is instead of it being $14,000 a parking spot, it ought to be 50. Because you can't even pay the spot for, this is the same number I guarantee from 30 years ago or 40 years ago, it's silliness. That would cut down on the in lieu because that would be more
That's a
fair to
burden.
the city
Yeah.
that we would have that money. I don't know how much we have in our coffers for, that we could spend for in lieu. It's not enough to do much.
It's been the
of
same
anything.
amount.
Forever.
For
It's
a long, long
forever.
time.
And city council, not to pick on the city council, they've never raised it, we should have been raising it.
Yeah, that's right.
All along. We also have a thing called conjunctive use parking, have you heard of this one? Where planning commissions have in the past said, oh, you have a hotel and a restaurant, I'm sure those hotel people eat your restaurant, therefore instead of
It's
30,
shared,
you just
yeah.
need 15.
Yeah.
That is, but it's allowed if planning commission finds that. The in lieu is by right.
Yeah.
You can just write the check
Yeah.
if you have enough money, which is
Yeah.
not correct, it's not right. Or make it bite hard, and we had to look at our lieu fee, I'm talking to city council and city manager, what's the in lieu in Pasadena or Santa
Right.
Barbara? I guarantee it's not
Oh,
14.5.
heck no.
I don't know that, but I don't
Oh.
think it is, so we had to look at those numbers. I know
You-
they are.
That's
You
a
know
no-
I know exactly what they are.
That's
We are-
Santa Barbara.
We are so far
So-
lower.
Yeah.
If I may be so bold as to suggest, this is a much larger issue.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think we'd be
Yeah,
able
I
to
think we're
resolve
ready.
this evening.
Yeah,
I know that
understood.
Taylor and I did not come prepared to address the policy implications of that. That is something I think we've heard loud and clear that is an issue on that. And it's a recurring issue. I think, you know, as Raphael said, he's but one person and the bandwidth available. If you were to take a look at the priorities of the things that we've spoken about tonight, it sounds to me like you want the tools on signage and you want the tools on objective design standards to be available to you. And
Yes.
maybe parking is something that gets taken up at the council level.
And a request that the council consider that sooner rather than later because it's going to be significant.
And it's a top goal of the council as a part of their work session.
Good.
And they did do a workshop and that was loud and clear. And as I, worked with Randy and our consultant, Rod and Roger, my counterpart, and we have a study from 2022, the raw numbers are all there, and there were actually, as I pointed out, there were actually a couple good, easy, low-hanging fruit
Right.
things to do.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of, do we have the will to get them done? And so a couple of, wayfinding is a good one.
Yeah.
I understand from my discussion with Roger and some other folks who were there a couple of years back that they tried doing wayfinding and they had some massive colossal amount for money for the wayfinding. Well, and I said, well, yeah, because you went to the most expensive sign firm. Duh. And so, but a wayfinding program done properly would go to the DRC to vet because it needs to be uniform. It needs to have a uniform look. It needs to be placed in locations as approved by the Public Works and in conjunction with the council. Where do we need to do those? That's in there, that's in the study. The numbers haven't changed. The number of spots, we haven't added any new spots. That hasn't changed. We probably subtracted a couple of them. Not my fault. And then there are other opportunities that we look on Mission, or you look around that we can curb things differently. We can do it, and that's why it's the idea of we need to get a master streetscape plan together, because that's the ultimate truth is, where can we recapture things on the easy route? Well, what goes to play for a master streetscape plan to get that done, to get that forward? Your parking fee. And so it kind of ties in together ultimately, and it is a larger issue that is sort of a council level public works planning. But some of the stuff is there to start, and that becomes a council goal, council issue of where do we start off with the low hanging fruit.
And you have to, I mean, one of the other things, I mean, the Sheets decision just came down.
That's what I was just gonna mention.
And it makes it more difficult, but not impossible. The fees, there's government code 53, something or other, I don't know the number, but the fees we charge cannot exceed our cost.
Right.
So we are in the process, we've begun the process of getting a consultant in here to help us establish what our fees should be. That's going to happen over the next few months. And then sometime before the first of the year, we're gonna go to council with the fees for development, for parking in lieu, for you name it, should be this number. The council hopefully will approve it. And then from that point forward, we'll have a number. Now, we do have the parking in lieu account that I guess we purchased lot 4 or 5 with that money here some number of years ago. There's still a small amount, it's certainly not enough to do anything significant with, but again, there's been, parking in lieu fees were waived. There was a business that went in a few years ago that had a parking in lieu fee assigned, but it was never collected, and then they moved on, and now the new business is in here and going, I don't need that number of parking spaces, so, I mean, it's just, again, it's about the lack of continuity with staff, it's the lack of continuity with council. In some cases, the staff, we're negligent. I mean, and it's unfortunate, but that's kind of where we are. And like I said, again, from my perspective, I told council I plan to work for 7 to 10 years, which means it's now 6 to 9.
Next should be 3 to 4.
But during my tenure, to the best of my ability, I'm not gonna let this stuff lapse, I mean, you have that commitment from me, and I know Raphael and Lisa feel the same way. We want this to work, but it takes the bandwidth, again.
Yeah.
We hear you.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but under the previous regime, a lot of very good staff were let go or decided to leave because they didn't like the way things were being managed, and then we retracted, and there's so much. Sacramento doesn't care we're a community of 6,000.
Yeah.
They treat us like we're Los Angeles. We have the same number of rules and everything else, and we don't have the tax base, we don't have the staff bandwidth. So, I mean, we're getting there. Again, I've been here a year now. I've almost got my training wheels off, and we're, let's go, let's do it. I definitely appreciate the feedback. We hear you loud and clear. There are things that are moving forward. I hope to be here to see them to fulfillment.
Well, and I want to compliment staff because I know that from the, over the last year and a half and working with staff in preparation for the design review committee, some of us remember the meetings where it was like, well, just tell us what color, the applicants were just anything, just let us move forward. We're way past that, and we really appreciate how you are giving us findings that they're black and white, and the support is essential for us to do our jobs. And of course, we're here to support you ultimately, because you are the consistency. So I want to say how much I appreciate all of that, and that you listened to us and arranged this for this evening. So given that we've now been here for over 3 hours, is it okay if we call an adjournment to the meeting?
Yes.
I second the motion. I'd like to do really my planning manager report very quickly.
Oh.
I tried.
He's
got some
Very-
important
very-
stuff.
very quickly.
Read us out,
All right. So, just to catch everyone up with what's going on in planning and building. Draft EAR comment period has finalized on Monday. We did receive a few comments, so myself and Lori are working with our consultant to complete what's called the final EIR and statement of override considerations. So what this means is we are at the final leg of the general plan, so we'll be having a GPAC meeting in May to close it out.
Do we have a date
I'm
yet?
gonna write that down.
1 second.
Okay.
Tentative planning commission date is June 2nd for adoption of the general plan. Tentative city council date is July 8th for adoption of the general plan. So as a part of this general plan amendment, we will be going to repeal and replace certain sections of the zoning ordinance, and that leads me to my next item for the planning commission. There are no items on the agenda except for one. That is a study session to discuss land use definitions, amendment of definitions, and amendment of zoning ordinances. And we're looking to combine some of our residential zones, R1 in particular, down to one to streamline it and provide more enhanced sort of streamlining based on new state regulations. This is the first step of the ODS, is actually getting our uses and our zones aligned to the new general plan, streamlined, condensed a little bit more for greater flexibility and or implementation. And so that's a study session that'll come before you, and that is actually not my first rodeo for something like this, so that's kind of cool. City staff in our hands, in the May DRC meeting, unfortunately DRC, you have a completely packed agenda for May. So we will likely have a site C review, which will be publicly noticed to the
Site C?
Yeah, I heard it.
to the neighbors, consistent with our development plan application. We'll have colors and signage for a new restaurant that is not named. Signage ordinance exception, so use the tools of what we heard tonight. We have heard you. We will realign staff reports as required.
Thank you.
And then, again, other applications as they are turned to the deemed complete deadline. So again, as I mentioned, I've changed things. We need at least 30 days to review to make sure it's actually sufficient. And again, based on feedback received, not only legal, but you this evening, Lisa and I will go back to the workshop and we'll tinker some more and have a little bit more tools in our tool belt to get signs where they need to go. As far as our workload, we've actually got a slew of applications come in over the last month. A couple DRC ones, but we actually have what's called 2 pre-application reviews. One is for a new medical office. They have elected not to go to the DRC because it's super preliminary. I will continue to advocate for them to go to the DRC for just a preliminary architectural review. They elected not to. And then we also have a single family home that came in, again, under the new pre-app review. So what we're doing is culminating all of our comments to the applicants from both planning, public works, utilities, and building, and giving them back a whole set, sort of what I call the road path to entitlement quicker than possible. So that's that. And then I think that's it.
We have a preliminary day for the GPAC.
I believe it's 3rd week of May. We're still working on that, so myself and Lori are trying to.
Okay, that was the GPAC meeting, because you said something, I thought you said June 2nd, but that's not right.
That's planning commission, so you're
No,
June 3rd?
June
Yeah.
2nd is a Sunday.
It's Monday, I believe. Or, sorry, yeah, you're right, I keep saying 2nd. It is June 3rd.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, but that's planning.
That's planning, yes. So
Okay.
GPAC, Lori and I are looking at the calendars because we're trying to do.
Okay.
Have
Got
another
it.
workshop with.
DRC is of May
Yeah.
16th, yeah.
16, yeah.
Okay, so long meeting, May 16th.
Can I have a clarifying question
Yeah.
though about the DRC, given the content?
I hope not.
Because the general plan, again, is in its final version, can we use, again, that background, no?
For what?
In terms of content for the other area? Because there is definition of design in the other area in that document that we worked very hard on.
The not
adopted.
TRC,
Not-
yeah.
it's
Not,
adopted.
so we
Not
know,
just adopted.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
When do we
That's why I'm
expect it to
asking
be
the
adopted
clarifying
again?
Planning
July
commission
8th.
June 2nd, and then.
Damn it.
City
July.
Council, June 3rd, and council July 8th.
Okay,
Darn.
so it's
So will there be
getting
a
closer.
PC meeting in May?
Yes, you will have one item, and it's
That's
a
the
very technical nuts and bolts item.
Workshop.
Okay,
So,
That's your workshop.
Yeah, study session.
Okay.
Yeah. So that concludes my report.
Okay, and so at 8:12, I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.